All right. I'm Marie Vigourou.
I'm Jeremy Greer.
And this is Rude Eats, a delicious podcast where we sink our teeth into every episode of the show Hannibal.
I want Will Graham, I really do. And I think that we could have some fun. Then you can do anything you like. I might even go and help you catch the Shrike. I want Will Graham, I want that man. For every meal and on demand. His mind shines and his body's cut. I know that he works for the FBI, but what other man has pure empathy and the ability to see my mind? Jack, what other thing have I ever asked you for? Besides, never looking into my pantry? And I won't get that either. Damn. I want Will Graham, I want him so. And he really doesn't need to know what's in my meals or on my mind. I just want Will Graham to be mine. I want him and I want him now. I said before, I don't care how. I'll give him tests, he'll draw a clock. And then his dark desires I will unlock. We'll be together, Will and me. We'll throw some grand dinner parties. We'll cut the flesh, we'll cook the meat. He'll eat the brew just like me. Give me goddamn Will Graham.
Oh boy. Mary.
Oh.
I think we need to set the stage a little bit because it's been a little while since we've recorded. We were going through pretty much, we're doing it basically weekly, even though this podcast comes out every 2 weeks. We're basically doing a weekly podcast there for a little while.
For context, this episode is supposed to come out on December 1st, and we are recording this, and it's not even October.
Yes,
so
we are way,
that's
way
where we
ahead. And you watched this episode immediately after we recorded the episode on episode 9, right? So you watched it immediately afterwards. I watched it that night as well. I've since rewatched it to do notes, and it's been about a week. I was out of town and things happened, so it's been about a week or 2 weeks since we recorded. And in that time, I think both of us have been kind of freaking out about this episode, but you have definitely been freaking out about this episode. I wish I could just screenshot DMs from you and put them on the internet sometimes of just like all the exclamation points that come with it. It's so great. It's so much fun.
It's the cap lock too. The cap lock worked overtime.
Yes, the caps lock was definitely enabled for the reactions.
Yes.
Do you want to kind of walk us through what you were thinking during your initial thoughts while we're talking about this? Or
oh my god, yeah, for sure. I mean, okay, so when I watched this episode, there was this constant anticipation and this hope that somebody was going to step in for Will, right? And I don't know how much we want to talk about the stuff that actually happens in the episode here, but like I had to take breaks. Like I had to pause the episode and like walk around my apartment, like just in a circle, like a hamster, and just like come back to the computer. And to be honest with you, Jeremy, I could not watch the episode a second time. I watched half of it and then I had to pause it and be like, I can't do this. Like this is too anxiety inducing for me to watch.
This might be, you might not be able to get through the podcast. We might have to cancel the podcast before.
Well, so that's the thing, right? Because I kind of wondered, I'm like, do I hate the show? But then I remind myself that this is a horror show, right? And that this episode really hit me where I see horror, which is medical gaslighting, apparently.
Apparently that's the thing that gets you.
Medical gaslighting and like lack of ethics in research, in clinical research.
It's funny because
this is just full of it.
We were reading your notes last night. Autumn and I were reading your notes, and Autumn mentioned like everybody has a thing. And like and it's just like something related to their work. So like when I podcasted with Chris, like one of the things that would get him was like HIPAA compliancy. So anytime something came up on Supernatural about like somebody shared, he'd be like HIPAA compliance, like it's part of his professional work. And like and Autumn has a thing too where she's like that could affect medical care. That machine you're using, like she's got a medical care kind of angle on this thing. And it was just as we read through it, like it's like, okay, so her thing is definitely medical gaslighting. Like this is definitely the thing that she it's so interesting to me that what people find horrific out of Hannibal, because I think it's easy to look at like the gore and the body horror, and like this episode contains some of the most gruesome things that we've seen Hannibal physically doing.
That's true.
And like, but the horror of it, like the actual terrifying part, isn't that at all. It's just like dealing with another person or mistreating another person in a medical capacity, which is, you wouldn't think that would be at all horrific, like in a show about cannibalism. Like you would think that that's the second thing.
No, it's so true. And to me, like the actual gore, which is quite disgusting in this episode, right? Like it is disturbing, but to me that's a footnote in the episode. Like that is not where the horror lies for me. For me, it's like Will desperately asking for help and being told that nothing's wrong with him, because that, like, you always ask me like what it is that I do, but like one of the things that I do is like study the effects of medical gaslighting on patients. Like that is literally one of the things that I write about a lot in my work.
Yeah, listeners, she sent me a published paper that directly related, like with her as an author, like along with several other people, like it sent me a published paper on this topic. So like if you guys go look around, you can find some really academic writing about this.
It was, and literally the title of the paper is like, he told me it was in my head. Right? Like that's things that people with chronic illness get told a lot of the time. Like, oh, you're fine. Your blood work is fine. Your scans are fine. Like you're fine. Go see a psychiatrist or go see a psychologist. And it's just so upsetting to hear it from real people and to see it enacted here on screen where, anyway, like I am physically unwell talking about this. Like this is just so much to me.
Well, let's, so we're going to cover Rude Eats, episode 10.
Yep.
Hannibal, episode 10. Buffet froid?
Buffet froid.
Buffet froid. Beth LeBeau is found murdered, having drowned in her own blood as a result of her face being cut into a Glasgow smile. Where did this come from? Graham's mental state continues to sharply decline.
Like, that's so scary.
He loses hours at a time, and when a vivid hallucination causes Graham to contaminate the crime scene, Lecter refers him to a neurologist, an old residency colleague, Dr. Sutcliffe. This was directed by John Dahl, written by Andrew Black, aired on May 30th, 2013. Buffet froid. What are we thinking here? Because this was a hard one, I think, to come up with, especially because the episode itself can be a lot of different things. Like if you just look at the episode and try to extract a theme, there's like several that we could talk about, and relating that to a cold buffet,
I know.
Which I guess is just like a salad bar. I guess that's what I would.
I mean, it can be a salad bar, but it's so buffet froid literally means cold buffet, right? And when you think about the visuals of it, it's basically cold food. So it can have like meat so long as it's cold or it's room temp. And it's usually arranged in like a very visually pleasing manner on one or more, usually long tables. So people are encouraged to like pick from the dishes that they like in the amount that they like. And so that means that like no one person is going to have the exact same meal as even just the person sitting next to them at a buffet, right? Like that's kind of what happens because everybody makes different choices. And just kind of like a side note, I know that we've talked about this before, about like how Hannibal's like stainless steel kitchen counters like kind of remind me of the FBI's autopsy tables. So when I read the title of this episode for the first time, I was like, oh my God. Like I just kind of imagine like this really macabre like picture of a dead person lying on a stainless steel surface and like styled to look like a buffet kind of thing. So anyway, that's not what's happening in this episode, but the episode itself, I think, is kind of a buffet where our characters are making a lot of choices in all caps with a little trademark sign next to it, right? And those choices reflect and influence their own identity. And that's what I would like for us to talk about in this episode as a theme. It's identity.
And I think that's great because one of the threads throughout this episode is Will having to ground himself by reminding himself not just where he is and when he is in time, but also who he is, right? And as we look at Georgia, who is going to be our, I guess, villain of the week, although she's not really a villain at all, but the killer of the week.
I absolutely disagree with calling her monster of the week.
Yes,
she is
absolutely.
Not.
She's not at all.
She is the victim of the week, for fuck's sakes.
She is struggling with her own identity because of the disease that she has. Struggling to see if she actually is a person, like a fundamental thing. Like, does she even think that she is alive? So I think as we talk about this episode, identity is going to be coming up a lot, and I'm very excited about it. You describing what a buffet froid is reminded me of Autumn and I were just in Italy celebrating our anniversary, and we went to we stayed at this really fancy hotel because what's money anyway? I'm not going to.
Right, exactly.
The world is on fire.
You're not going to take it with you in the grave, right? Like, you might as well spend it.
What's money? They had this incredible setup for like a breakfast bar thing. But now I'm thinking about it. I was like, this was definitely a buffet for. And I sent you a picture, and I just happened to catch Autumn looking back at me, like grinning with this huge thing because she was so excited about it. But the setup was just that, was like a ton of meats and cheeses and fruits and just everything at kind of room temperature, just being all of there. That's beside the point. I do love this theme of identity, though, just strictly because as we talk about the various characters throughout here, even in Will's relationship with Jack, identity is going to come up, and obviously George's identity. I do want to mention ahead of time that we've talked a lot about other Brian Fuller stuff, and Georgia is actually from her name is Georgia in the other Brian Fuller show, Dead Like Me, where she plays a reaper, and it's very, very funny. It's a good show.
I do want to mention, because you said something that was really interesting, where like depending on that, there's a lot of different ways to look at this episode, and one thing that I kind of want to just clarify from the get-go, not wanting to over explain or whatever, but like the themes that we're choosing for these episodes, like they could technically be anything, right? They're just kind of like arbitrarily themes that we've chosen, and we've also chosen to try to relate them to the title of the episode. But you could look at this episode through many, many different themes. Like one that kept on coming back for me was death. Like look at this episode through the theme of death, and you're going to extract different insights and different findings. And so like that's okay. That's all okay. Like we're making a choice today of looking at it through identity, but like you could do that, make your own podcast, right? Like, and look at it through any kind of theme, and you could definitely talk about this episode for another hour and a half, right?
Yes. And if you do decide to make your own Hannibal podcast, let us know, because
yes, we would love to know. We would love to listen.
I've been actually listening to oh crap, now I can't remember the name and I feel terribly. I listened to another Hannibal podcast that's been out there for a while.
Oh, is it Fate and Circumstance?
It was Fate and Circumstance. Thank you very much. I listened to them not long ago, and I just had a great time. It was fun. Like,
oh, that's awesome.
Taking a totally different approach than how you and I do it, and that's so exciting to me when I get to see podcasts covering the same stuff. It was interesting though, and this is no fault of their own. Two of the cast members are Hannibal newbies. They don't know anything about the show, but they barely know anything about the books. Very similar to yourself. And I, like, as I was listening to them talk about their experiences with Hannibal for the first time, I was like, I don't really care about this. I want to see what Mary thinks. So you not being on other Hannibal podcasts has prevented me from listening to other Hannibal podcasts. So just so you know, you need a guest. You need a guest on some other podcast so I can listen to them.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I appreciate that. I'll keep that in mind, and I'll ask for guests' thoughts on other podcasts, I guess.
Do you want to head into our Beat by Eat section?
Yes, please.
So we're going to start out in Greenwood, Delaware. I find this whole cold open to be interesting. It's one of the longest cold opens we've seen that doesn't have anything to do with or that doesn't feature any of our main characters. It's much more of a typical like monster of the week kind of build up, like where we get this like lengthy intro of this woman coming home. It's very spooky. Her shed's closed when she walks by it, and then it's open as she goes into her house. One of the complaints I've seen about this episode is how Georgia moves around or gets around, and I'm just when I think about stuff like this, because Georgia's going to move like from here to Will's house and that kind of thing. I don't care. Like this magical realism, everybody. Like, let's just have fun with it. Let's just roll with it.
And also keeping in mind like Georgia's condition, like it would make sense that she would be walking and walking for hours and hours on end, right? Like yes. I don't care. I think it's great. Like that is not my issue with this episode.
Absolutely, yeah. The woman gets into bed. She notices her ceiling leaking, and she hears something in the attic. So she goes up there to check it, and we see there's a hole in her roof. And snow has begun to fall inside and melting, and that's what's causing the leak. And out on top of the roof, we see footprints, and that's kind of spooky.
Which is so spooky.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I was like, no.
This woman staples up some like plastic sheeting to cover the hole, goes back to bed. As she's going back to her bed, she sees wet footprints on the floor. And as she gets closer and closer to the bed, she's grabbed by a hand and then drug under. And we see blood like spatter all over the outside of the bed. Yeah, this is just a much more typical cold open than I think we're used to.
Yeah, it felt very supernatural, right? With the blood splatter and everything. I was like, oh, is that a little, is that a little hint, a little wink? I don't know.
I don't know. Who knows? We are the premier Hannah Super Files. I think that's how we came up.
Hannah Super Files. I love that.
We jump over to Will. Will has a great line here talking about how his nerves are like roller coaster cogs, just clacking up before a big drop. And he's still sort of reeling from the revelation that Abigail murdered Nick and that Hannibal helped her hide it. And I had a moment for this. I debated whether to talk about this on the podcast, but I'm going to because I actually think it's kind of funny. So he's talking about, I've taken a life, and Hannibal points out, so have you. And Hannibal tells Will that he's grieving, not for Nick's life, but for the life that was taken from him and from Abigail. And so I watched this episode the first time, and like, hey, it's Hannibal, we're having a great time. Then I went to therapy. And my therapist said, in talking about my cancer diagnosis and everything, that it's, some of the things that I was going through, some of the processing that I needed to do is grieving the person that I was before I had cancer, right? Like, and then I watched this episode again, and I'm like, was that good advice? Why is Hannibal and my therapist telling me the same thing? This is horrifying. Yeah. So I just thought that was super interesting.
But it actually is, right? Like, and that's kind of the thing that I personally find difficult to untangle. It's that there's a lot of the things that Hannibal offers Will as like advice that is actually really good. Like it's really good advice, and it's like based in science, based on evidence and all of that stuff. But then he weaponizes it in order to manipulate Will, which is where I really that really grinds my gears personally, right? But when you think about it, that is an incredibly accurate way of looking at abusers, right? People who abuse other people, who use their power against others. It's that they mix truths with untruths so much that you can't tell what is true and what is not anymore. And in that way, I find that this show is so good at depicting that.
Absolutely. And continuing the Hannibal tradition of just how great the dialogue is. I think this is probably one of the more famous lines from the show, where Hannibal says, "We both know the unreality of taking a life. We know in those moments they are not flesh, but light and air and color." I think this is a beautiful line because of how horrific it is. Like, it's he's literally telling Will what it's like to kill for him. and that those people aren't people anymore, that they become light and air and color. I'm really surprised he didn't say in scent, too, given Hannibal's affinity for being able to smell things. But he's describing a transmutation of changing people from people into art. And it's just a fascinating thing. And Will picks up on it, too, where he's like, is that what it feels like to feel alive? And Hannibal, of course, just goes, do you feel alive, Will? And Will says, I feel like I'm fading. Just, it's poor Will. Poor Will can get some help, please. Can Will get some help, please?
Throughout this entire episode, I was just like, somebody take him to a hospital.
Somebody do something, please.
Somebody do something. And I also just love that you're like literally writing down dialogue at this point. Like it's so good. It is so good. Because we're going to talk a little bit later about Will's, diagnosis / lack of diagnosis, because I obviously had to go on Medline and look it up. And we're going to talk about him saying that like he feels like he's fading, because so good.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard a fact the other day. English is obviously not Mad's first language, and he struggled with a lot of this dialogue because it's like so purpley in prose and so over the top that half the time he didn't even understand what the fuck he was saying. Like he was just kind of repeating it. And I find that fascinating because of how well it's delivered, right? Like it's almost that disconnect actually works for the show in some ways because he's delivering and it feels very otherworldly. So Hannibal decides to ask Will to do an exercise. He first describes that he wants Will to begin to recognize where he is and when he is, to focus on the present moment. And so Will, kind of says out loud, like, I'm Will Graham, I'm in such and such Baltimore, it is this time. And he asked Will to draw a clock. Finally, we can reveal the draw a clock names.
I was so excited. I was like, oh, that's where that line in the song comes from.
It must have been like it's so hard to make jokes like that, which I knew fans would super appreciate, but that you hadn't seen yet. But I'm so glad you just rolled with me. We're like, I don't understand what that is. Let's roll. Let's do it.
I mean, of course, there has to be trust, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And Will draws what looks like a perfect clock face. And when he hands it to Hannibal, Hannibal looks at it, and it is very far from a perfect clock face. And it's like, obviously he's having trouble, like, I don't know the medical terms for this, right? But like his clock is, it almost looks like it's melting. Like all of the numbers are not in the circle, the clock hands are elsewhere. Like obviously something is going on. There's some disconnect in his brain. And it's horrifying. Like, because Hannibal looks at this and instead of going, oh, we've got a problem, he's like, closes the book up and is like, very well, let's continue our talk.
Right. And that's kind of the thing, like, I didn't know that you could create this kind of tension, this kind of horror with just a drawing of a clock. Like, what the fuck? Like, how are they so good? And again, like, I think, especially when we get to like more of the medical gaslighting part, like, I'm going to make it sound like I hate the show, but that's not true. I hate what is happening in the show.
Yes.
But I love the show for how well they are creating this tension, this horror, right? Like, just to be clear from the get-go.
Yeah, there's a reason that there's a big difference between hating the show and hating what characters in a show that you love do.
Yes.
And it's one of the reasons I think that this is such an iconic show and this is such an iconic performance from Mads, because as much as he's horrible, you still love the show because it's beautiful and terrible. And like, it's very rare that something beautiful and terrible exists at the same time. So it's good that we have this. We finally get our intro and we jump over to Will, who is walking into his house to gut a fish that he just caught. Can I just say, growing up as a hunting and fishing guy with grandparents that did this stuff, the idea that you would do this in your kitchen is so fucking bonkers to me. I don't know. Like,
I know, right? Like, I've never seen my grandfather clean out a fish in the kitchen. Like, that was an outdoor activity.
Table and like outdoor sink outside and like a place to put all of the guts and everything and like clean that up and then go in the kitchen and like fillet it down and do all of that stuff. But like actually cleaning it? Yeah, no. You do not. My grandmother would have lost her fucking mind if he had done that. Like, absolutely not.
Same. Same. Like, like there was like newspaper outside, right? He would do this on newspaper. He would clean out the fish outside on newspaper, and then he would hand it to my grandma, who would then like take care of the preparing for the cooking. But
yes,
like,
yes,
anyway,
absolutely.
So weird.
So the blood starts oozing out of this fish, and he sees himself in the blood. He sees
and it's
himself
abnormal,
reflected.
right? Like,
Yes.
because fish don't bleed that way.
No, not at all. Like,
To be clear, for people who may not know.
it's very spooky. It's very horrific. And then he wakes up. First he fades out. We can see him like seeing himself in the blood. He's starting to lose who he is. And then as he wakes up, he is literally carving up the body of the young woman from the cold open. And he freaks out because he's covered in blood. Her body is beneath him. He doesn't know where he is. He struggles to get up. He's slipping in the blood that's on the floor. And then he rushes to the first door that he sees. And outside waiting for him is our whole ERT crew, as well as Jack. And obviously he's been here doing his normal thing, like putting the crime scene together. But he doesn't remember how he got here.
Honestly, this whole sequence is just so scary. Like, again, like the amount of tension that they're able to put in this sequence is just, it's astounding, because like as the viewer, we're really seeing Will's point of view in this moment. And I don't know about you, right? Like, I don't want to speak for you, but I was so scared like the whole time, like from the bloody fish to him on top of Beth, like as she's literally drowning in her own blood. Like, it's very graphic, right? And then he sees the team and he's like, it's so discombobulating, right? Like, I just so felt for him in that moment, especially knowing like the clock that he had drawn and knowing that there is something wrong with his brain, right? Clearly, there has to be something wrong with his brain at this point. It reminded me of the Angel episode again, where I was kind of wondering if Will had done the killing. And so I like, even on the first watch of this episode, I was like, oh, so they're again calling back to this specific episode where the killer is very, very sick, right? And we're trying to make a parallel with Will. So I know that the show is working overtime to try to do that and to make us think about like a sick or a killer who is ill and making parallels with Will.
Yes, absolutely. And also, like, this plays, like, you mentioned something here that I wanted to bring back up is, you know, wondering if Will had done the killings. And I think, like, obviously Will didn't, because he walks outside and, like, we see a crime scene. But there's a moment where, like, Will probably believed that he was killing that woman. And that plays into our theme this week, right? Like, let's talk about identity of Will identifying himself as somebody who doesn't kill, but who has killed, and his struggle to accept that about himself. And then obviously like Hannibal playing into that in a real big way, exactly the way that he played into it with Abigail, of convincing her that, you know, her kill was a murder instead of self-defense, and having her deal with all of the fallout from that. Real fascinating. Well, real fascinating.
It's also because like so identity has a lot to do with the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, right? And how we story ourselves. And so like when you end up doing something that goes against that narrative that you've created for yourself, it's very
discombobulating.
Oh my god. Yes, thank you. It is very discombobulating. Like, because you're like, well, then who am I? Because it comes and it breaks that picture perfect or that idea that you had of yourself. And so I think that like you then have to restory yourself with this event in mind. And so in Will's case, like, I am not a killer. I go into the killer's mind, but now I've killed. So am I a killer? Who is in my mind? Like, it becomes very difficult for him, I think, in this moment to story himself and to create a new narrative about himself that includes this event in a way that's not like, that doesn't break down his identity. And same thing for Abigail, really.
Yes. Will moves outside. He washes his hands, and then he is, of course, confronted by Jack, who is like, "What the fuck, dude? You contaminated a crime scene." And he interprets this.
I love that that's what he cares about. Like,
right?
Fucking asshole.
Yeah. He interprets this as Will being afraid, and Will says, "You know, I felt responsible for this killing for a moment." And Jack interrupts him and says, "You know, that's not what you do. Like, you recreate the thinking of the killer," literally telling Will what he thinks.
And this is the second time in this episode, like, and this is only like 5 minutes in, right? Like, this is the second time in this episode that somebody doesn't listen to Will's words and his own story about himself, and basically replaces them with their own. Like, we've been drawing a lot of parallels so far in the last 10 episodes, or the last 9 episodes, between Jack and Hannibal, probably, since like episode 2 at this point. But here it's really, really on display. And I'm so sorry, but I'm going to start early with my big academic words. But I think that what we're seeing here is a form of epistemic injustice, which basically means that some of the people around Will don't value his knowledge specifically due to his identity. In this case, I believe because he is neurodivergent. So in this case, like, the knowledge that is disvalued is his knowledge of himself. And we're seeing Jack and Hannibal earlier, like, telling Will how he feels and what he does, instead of listening to him, telling them how he feels and what he does.
So I was going to bring this up a little later, when the actual conversation happens, but I think it's going to fit here real well. I copied and pasted some pictures from the script, because this is something that Hannibal does on a regular basis, where he associates Will's words with the words of a killer. Yes. So like in this example, he's talking about, you know, how the killer was desperate and lonely and sad, and Hannibal says, "Are you lonely, Will?" Like making Will have the association that he is the killer, driving that home and forcing Will to kind of lose his identity, right? To at least blur where that line is. And it's something that it's a writing thing that happens throughout these episodes. It's been happening since the beginning that I never really picked up on until I was kind of skimming through Tumblr one day. Which is
love Tumblr.
Thank you Tumblr for just like having a huge tag of Buffet Froid, so that I can just like spend 2 hours getting lost in. Also, just because I was curious, I didn't know the word. Epistemic. So I googled it.
I know
it
was a tough one.
And got to the Wikipedia page, and they have like the, you know, at the beginning of every Wikipedia article is like if you're looking for this, like go here. If you're like the disambiguation thing, and it said for the album, see this length. And apparently there is a Norwegian extreme metal band called the Keep of Kalisen, who released an album called Epistemology. So gotta go check that out at some point.
Seriously. So epistemic really has to do with knowledge, right? And so epistemology would be the study of knowledge, and which is I'm that really excites me. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, oh yes, tell me more about that. So now I'm like, okay, tell me more about that album.
I'm interested in the Norwegian metal band. Absolutely.
Yes.
In this conversation with Will and Jack, Will describes himself as getting lost just for a blink, which is not what's happening at all, really.
Well, exactly. Like this, I think the reason why because this made me really, really sad. And I was like, why is this making me so sad? And I think it's because like you said, it's not what's happening. Like, he didn't get lost. Like, and to use your words, like, he's tripping balls. Like, something is going on, right? But he's choosing to use Jack's words to describe his own experience instead of his own words, because like it's been made very clear to him that Jack doesn't care about his own words, right? He only cares about his.
Yes, absolutely. And Jack just says that he is officially concerned. And there's some back and forth here about Will being, what does official mean? I thought you were unofficially concerned. And that's where I'm going to Hannibal. And eventually Jack asked, have I broken you? And Will's response, I think, is one of the most heartbreaking things in the episode, where he says, do you have anyone that does this better unbroken than I do broken? And the response to this, Jack says, is that fear makes you rude, Will. And there's this, I think I could probably go for about 30 minutes just on this interaction, but I know. Will actually expressing like, I have to do, like, I'm the only one that can do this. You're relying on me, even if I'm broken, even if this is breaking me, even if I'm losing time. And Jack taking that as an insult to him, or an insult to his, I guess, management, or his ability to see something. I don't know. Like,
Well, it's this, I'm seeing this as like almost Darvo, right? Which is like, he's like, basically what Will is saying is like, yes, I am broken, but you are relying on me and you've made it clear that like you need me. And so I will continue doing this and you have nobody else. And Jack doesn't like that answer because he doesn't want to hear that Will is broken, right? And so he's like, fear makes you rude. Like, it's a way of like turning the tables back on Will. Like, this is, again, typical, like, he is, and I know that I'm using the word abuse a lot. I'm going to be using the word abuse a lot in this episode, but that's what this is, right? Like, Jack, as Will's superior, is using his power over him to make Will stay, quote unquote, in his place.
Yes.
And so instead of addressing the fact that Will just said that, yes, he is broken, he's policing the tone that Will is using in order to speak to him.
Yes.
And I'm so mad about that. So mad about that because that's just really bad management. And I do want to say, Jeremy, that FBI Assistant Director Walter Sergei Skinner would have pulled Will from the field a long time ago.
I don't know if you listened to the most recent Non-Human Biologics, but
I did. I'm so excited.
I did see some hunkitude on Skinner's part, so the show is slowly but surely changing my mind.
He is so hunky.
Although I've heard in the next episode of X-Files that I have to cover, like I'll be watching it right after this podcast, that they kill an elephant. So I'm not super excited about that, but we'll see.
That's just the X-Files.
Hopefully that wasn't Skinner that did it.
No, it's not. I'm telling you right now, it's not Skinner. Skinner is hunky and he never does anything bad.
And he does not kill elephants.
No, he does not kill elephants.
I don't know that you've seen this. There's a whole Tumblr blog that just posts pictures of fictional characters and asks if Hannibal would eat them as a poll. I don't know if have you seen any of this at all? Okay, I'll start sending you some screenshots. Like the last one I saw was like Samwise from Lord of the Rings, and it was like 10% yes and 90% no. They would not. Just so weird.
Well, I guess it depends on like what the relationship is between. I'm like taking this very seriously as a question, but like it depends on the relationship. How did Sam they meet? And Hannibal would have. Yes, exactly. Because Sam can be very rude, right? Especially when he doesn't like somebody, and I don't think he would like Hannibal, right? And so like I think Hannibal would then find him rude and therefore might eat him. Sure. But I'm just like, but Sam doesn't deserve it.
Back upstairs, the ERT group dissect the crime scene. Will's print is on the knife handle, unfortunately. And they describe that what the killer did to this young woman as trying to remove a mask. The woman's face is all like cut up and it's horrible. Very terrible. And
it's so scary.
We go to Hannibal's apartment, or office, and Will remembers the coppery smell of blood on his hands.
And there's this like cut to Hannibal moment here, where Hannibal's like looking at Will like almost up and down, like with this look on his face, and I can just imagine him thinking like, yes, I can smell it from here, thank you very much. Like, you don't need to tell me about that.
Yes, yeah, I got you. I got that covered. And Will describes the feeling that is happening as a grandiosity to the violence, I imagine, that feels more real than what I know to be true. And like, it's definitely a sign that and we've seen this throughout since the beginning, like every time he imagines these scenarios, he puts himself into the role of the killer, and he graphically and brutally kills these victims in his mind, not in reality, but he lives himself doing it. And those memories, like I think he even says like he can remember killing her, even though he knows he didn't. It's just poor Will.
Well, I mean, have you ever do you have that thing where sometimes like people will say, oh, do you remember this? And like, because I don't know, maybe that's just me, but like I know that especially when it comes to like stuff that happened a long time ago, like I'll remember stuff, but it feels like I'm remembering like a picture.
Yes. Because
we have pictures of this event, and I'm like, I don't know if I remember the actual event or if I just remember the picture. And so like it sort of feels like this is what Will is kind of doing, like he's having trouble differentiating between like real memories and like what he imagines to have happened in this moment.
And there's a line here, and this goes back to something else that I was saying about Hannibal using dialogue and associating Will with the killer, where Will says, I remember cutting into her. I remember watching her die. And Hannibal says, "You must overcome these delusions that are disguised in your reality." And then he takes a beat. What savage delusions does this killer have? So again, like, we talk about changing the subject flirtatiously, but this is a different way of doing that, where he's going from the topic of Will's mental health, of what Will is going through, and associating that directly through the use of verbiage to the killer. Again, trying to get Will to identify himself as a killer, or at least to blur that identity, which is no.
This is a very slow conditioning of like he's basically conditioning him to see himself. And this is interesting because it comes back to the conversation that he was having with Jack, where Jack has this very specific idea of like, this is not what you do. What you do is think like a killer. But I think Hannibal is basically saying like, think of yourself like a killer, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Ugh.
And I
hate them both right now. I'm so mad at them.
I want to compare this to the breakfast that Hannibal treated Abigail to, and what he did there to her. And I just want to keep in mind that like there's a commonality between the way that he's treating Abigail and the way he's treating Will. So it's not like
because she was also tripping balls when that was happening.
100%. He wanted to push her mind to places that it wouldn't normally go and blur her identity. Yeah. It's gonna end in such a happy way. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. It's all good.
I don't believe you.
You know how at the end of Lord of the Rings, like Sam just marries that chick? Like that's just gonna happen to these characters. Everybody's gonna be great. You don't have to worry about it. Everything's good.
Don't believe you.
Will says that he feels sad and lonely, and that as he was imagining himself as the killer, he saw through himself in the mirror. And as he's saying this, he's leaning back on Hannibal's ladder. And Hannibal like walks incredibly close to him. And this is just, I don't use this term often, but this is very slutty. This is just very slutty for both of them. Even though they're both going, like, one is trying to manipulate the other's like actual medical disease into but it's very slutty. I can't say it enough. It's very slutty. So,
it's one of those things where like, I'm looking at this and like, obviously what's going on is very wrong. There's an abuse of power. There's this, there's that. But I'm just like, I want them to kiss
I just want them to kiss. Yeah, could you guys just get into it a little bit? I just want to like...
I'm like, because he's like leaning back and like he's showing up his neck, and I'm just like, oh.
At least do the like Mr. Darcy hand clench. Like, give me that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, give us something.
Give me something. This reminds me so much of the scene in Supernatural where Castiel and Dean are just, they're in the middle of like some fucking abandoned parking garage, and I just remember it vividly because it's like this huge crane shot that comes down, and they are standing so fucking close together for no reason. Like they could just be like, they could literally be shouting each other an acre away, but they are inches apart. And I'm like, what are you guys doing?
Yep. They just want to be close to one another. And that's exactly what's going on here, I think.
Absolutely. Will insists that he is not crazy, that there has to be something medical going on.
And I think, and he says this thing that like really hit home for me. He says like, I know what kind of crazy I am, and this isn't that kind of crazy. And I think that this is really, really super powerful because, and obviously there's ableist language there, but like putting that aside, like he's in this moment, like even though he's being shut down by Hannibal and by Jack, like he's still saying like, there is something wrong with me. I know who I am. Right? Like, I know my identity and something is wrong. And like, I just think that with all of the adversity in his life at the moment, like, this is incredibly strong and resilient of Will to still stand firm in his identity and be like, this is not who I am.
Yes, absolutely. It's a very powerful moment for Will, I think, to say this, to push back against these two figures of authority in his life. Finally, Hannibal is like, hey, you know what? I know a neurologist. Like, we can get you a brain scan. Finally. And we cut to Hannibal walking Will into the neurologist's office. This is Dr. Sutcliffe. He's, for some reason, got paintings of horses all over his office for no reason.
There are so many horses in this episode.
It's so weird and doesn't mean anything. Like none of this means anything. At one point, the paintings move around, so that's even worse. Like we don't know what's happening with these paintings. It's just very strange.
I didn't notice that.
And yeah, they start. Hannibal and Sutcliffe obviously have known each other for a long time. We're going to find out later that they're like we're in residency together. And they have this kind of witty repartee back about their individual professions of being the brain versus what the brain does, or what the brain can do or make you think versus like what it actually is. Because obviously Hannibal is the psychologist and Sutcliffe is the neurologist. So like it's a physical versus I hate to use soft science, but you know what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying.
I mean, that's how people call it. So I think you can definitely do that. Yeah. And psychology, to be fair, has fought really, really hard to be seen as a quote unquote hard science. So it's it's a thing.
Will says that he has been having issues for 3 or 4 months, but he doesn't really know where the hallucinations started. And he says that I just slowly became aware that I might not be dreaming. This is terrifying to me. Like the idea that you would be having these hallucinations, that you would, I've never really, like I've taken hallucinogenics like recreationally before. But after a surgery recently, they gave me oxycodone, and I knew the drive home from the hospital to my house was going to be fucking horrible, right? Like I don't know if you know anything about Louisiana roads, but they're not like super awesome if you just had surgery. Like it's going to be uncomfortable. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this pill and it's going to make me feel better. Spoilers, it didn't even kick in until after I got home. And then afterwards I was just fucking tripping in the worst, most awful way, where I felt like I was seeing stuff and hearing stuff, and the idea that this would be happening quote unquote naturally, and that you're just slowly becoming aware of it is very terrifying to me.
It's I don't know if in these moments I'm always a little bit scared to share, because I'm like, what if what I'm experiencing is not normal? But like I don't know if that happens to you, but like sometimes I'll be dreaming, and then like I'm not sure if it's a dream or if I'm actually awake.
Absolutely.
And again, to think that like this could be happening regularly, and like
during
to realize
job.
that you
right?
I know, right? Like exactly. And it's just so terrifying, right? Like
Poor Will.
And you know, it's really hard because like when Hannibal was like, oh, I know a neurologist, I was like, he's gonna get an MRI finally. Like I was so excited. I was like, okay, all right, you know, like it's a Hannibal referral, but it's gonna be a scan. Like you can't lie about a scan. Turns out that you can. And then the next shot is like him walking into the room with Will, and I'm like, no.
Anybody but Hannibal, please give this man an MRI. We take it back.
Exactly. And again, like I find that it's such a weird like blurring of lines, because like in I can't remember if it was last episode or a couple episodes ago, like there was this conversation about the nature of their relationship, right? Like, are they friends who have conversations, or are they patient and medical professional? And here, like, medical professionals don't usually walk into like a room with another medical professional to talk about their patient. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't happen. Like your oncologist doesn't walk in with like your therapist to talk about your oncology treatment, right? Like that doesn't happen.
Not. Yeah,
absolutely. And vice versa, right? And I just found it to be such a weird thing that he decided, well, I mean, obviously we know why, but like I was just like, Hannibal.
I think it's also so. Number one, I want to just mention that like that blurring of relationship is also tied back into identity, to our theme, which I think is really, really cool. And then second, I think this is also showing just how vulnerable and unsafe Will feels, that he is bringing Hannibal to medical appointments, because Hannibal can help him relay what's happening to him. Like, I feel like at this point, Will can't even trust himself to tell a doctor what's wrong.
Well, if he's losing time, right, how can he know for sure?
Exactly, right? Like, and that's the reason he's relying upon Hannibal, who is his friend / therapist, to come to these things, where normally, like, my wife would do that, right? Like, or I would just go by myself. Like, I hadn't actually thought about that till you said it. So that's such a good point that like Hannibal being here is so totally wrong. We'll get to the
on so many levels, right?
Oh,
and
yeah,
we're gonna talk more about that. As
we probably got 45 minutes of this TV show left, and we're an hour into the podcast. So
I'm so sorry.
No, don't be sorry. This is 5-star podcast, 5-star runtimes to steal.
Yes, that's true.
Stealing that from the good people over at what is the name of that? Something about civilization. It's a podcast about Star Wars, and they do like 2-hour episodes on an episode of Clone Wars, like a 30-minute cartoon. Like but that's the joke. It's a 5-star podcast, 5-star runtimes. That's always thought
I
was
love
funny.
that. And again, like we're only like releasing these every second week, so we have to make sure that people get like bang for their buck,
absolutely,
right? That
yeah.
they're not.
We want it to take 2 weeks to listen to. That's
Exactly.
As Will goes into the MRI machine, Hannibal looks over at Sutcliffe and is like, by the way, this is encephalitis. I know it. I could smell it. He describes it as...
I called it.
You did. You absolutely called it. It was so hard not to say anything, but I wanted you to experience this moment of joy naturally. He describes it as having a fevered sweetness. And he shows Sutcliffe the clock that Will drew, and the guy agrees. Like, oh yeah, this is totally encephalitis. And it's at this point that I think you maybe wanted to just stop the podcast altogether. Because at this point, Hannibal looks over at Sutcliffe, and there's this awful... if you know, kind of unspoken conversation that happens, and Hannibal just kind of comments, blithely about how rare it is to study the psychological effects of a disease like this. And Sutcliffe kind of looks at him like, are you saying what I think you're saying? And Hannibal says, there are great discoveries to be made. Basically implying like, hey, if you hide this, like we can both get some information out of this. And I'm just going to turn this over to you because this is fucking horrible. And I think you have a lot to say about this. So I'm ready. I think you need to vent. I think you need to get the poison out.
I just need you to imagine that as I was watching this, like first of all, I had to pause it, go do my little hamster walk around my apartment, and then like just imagine that picture of Ben Affleck like smoking a cigarette with his eyes closed. Like that was me. Like I don't smoke, but if I smoked, I would have smoked. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is like I needed this moment. Like I think I got a snack because I was just like I need to like do something about this. But like, okay, do I really need to get into how terrible this is? Like how bonkers it is? Like that would immediately get your license suspended, your medical license suspended. Like just to be very clear with people, like this stuff does not or should not happen. Like nobody would ever publish a case study where treatment, like proper treatment, was denied to a patient, right? Like this is Nazi level stuff. And I'm not saying this like as a hyperbole, like this is actual Nazi level stuff. Like, and it made me think of the Tuskegee experiment. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but yeah, right. Like this, I wasn't until just a couple of years ago when I found out about it. And I was just like, this is like absolutely bonkers. Like it's basically when the U.S. public health system and the CDC targeted about 400 poor Black men with latent syphilis. So they had syphilis, but it wasn't actually active in their system yet. And the goal of this experiment was to observe the progression of the disease if it was left untreated. For some context, right, the study was started in 1932 and it was supposed to last about 6 months, right? And so the study team told the participants that they would be receiving free medical care. And the thing is that they never told them about their condition. The Tuskegee experiment ended up lasting 40 years, not 6 months, 40 years. Okay. So from 1932 to 1972, 72. Okay. And during that time, none of the 400 men, Black men, poor Black men, were ever treated for syphilis, and 100 of them died. And people might be asking, but Mary, like when did we find out how to treat syphilis? And the answer would be 1947. Oof. In 1947, Okay. We found that I feel like I'm like a reb for the rebrand at this moment. And I'm just like, in 1947, okay, like we found, but this is really how I feel. Like I feel exactly the same way that she does when she talks about her legal stuff and that when she gets really, really mad about it.
Yeah,
like this
absolutely.
This is my thing. Like this is Mary for the rebrand. Like you're like,
absolutely.
In 1947, we found that antibiotics, okay, I'm sweating, that's how angry I am right now, treat syphilis properly. And were these black men ever informed of this? Absolutely not. Did the study team, right, which included 2 governmental agencies in the US, ever treat these men with these antibiotics? No, they absolutely did not. And all in the name of great scientific discoveries. Right. And this just really, really gets me. Like, this is literally the reason why we have the research ethics rules that we have today. OK. And like working in clinical research, particularly in like clinical trials, like the autonomy of patients and study participants is like so important. And like to relate it back to this episode, like to see that these 2 medical professionals are just willing to withhold treatment that exists, that is known, that is effective and safe for this patient is like, it just gets me in such a visceral space in my own identity, I think. Maybe that's why it gets me so much.
Yeah. I mean, you've obviously done actual research, and this obviously relates to your profession and your field of study and something that you feel is important. And so to see it on the screen is realized is just the most horrifying thing that you could possibly do to a person. It has to be intense. Like I can't imagine those feelings. Even without that, like when I watched this for the first time, I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. Like, are they really about to do this? Like, it's just the idea that somebody would take control over you that way. And I think, everybody has probably heard medical horror story. This actually happened this past week, where a friend of mine was running a super high blood pressure and went to the ER, and they refused to admit her, and they were just like, "Go home, take a pill or whatever."
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And she was like, "No, something is going on. Like I was here yesterday. This problem hasn't stopped," and they were just kind of dismissing her. And it just
this is also super common for women, unfortunately. Like women tend to have like cardiovascular issues that are left untreated because it's quote unquote misdiagnosed as anxiety. I'm just like, fuck you all so fucking much.
Fuck all of this.
Yes.
Yeah, this is horrible, and guess what? It's going to get a lot worse as we go. So
I'm sure
this is not going to be fun for anybody. Will, as he enters the MRI, he is having memories of himself killing the young woman in the cold open, and he pictures himself as he's laying down in the MRI. He pictures himself laying next to her corpse underneath the bed, and then we get the results of the test. The right side of his brain is completely aflame. And Sutcliffe says his symptoms are only going to get worse. And Will's like, yes, I know this is going to be unfortunate. And Sutcliffe kind of makes a casual joke of, man, what do you smell on me? And Hannibal looks at him and says, opportunity. I
think my exact words when I was first watching this was like, motherfucker. I was just so angry. But okay, so if we're looking at this like really as the character of Hannibal, I thought that I had a good idea of who Hannibal was in these first 9 episodes, and this is kind of like changing the game for me, right? Like I'm having to think again about what I thought Hannibal's identity was, right? If we want to relate that to the theme, because he does make a big deal out of talking about how much he cares about Will, right? Like, I care about your life. Like, do you really? Like, I don't think so, right? Like, I don't believe you anymore. And like, also the way that he reacted in Fromage when he saw Will like surviving Tobias's attack, like, I'm having trouble making sense of that for Hannibal. Like, I feel like what Will is going through with having to like restory himself with the idea that he has taken a life is kind of like what I, as a viewer that knows nothing about the Hannibal lore, am having to do with Hannibal, because I thought I knew what Hannibal was about, but now I'm learning something, and I cannot understand how that makes sense within what I knew of him.
So far, I think throughout season 1, we've only seen 2 characters that Hannibal genuinely cares about. Everybody else is pretty disposable, or looked at as an interesting diversion, or looked at, in that case, talking about Alana Bloom, or maybe looked at as an enemy to be dealt with or to be manipulated, like Jack. The only 2 people that he's actually showed any sort of emotional value to, or assigned any emotional value to, is Abigail and Will. And both of those examples, the way that he shows love is by breaking them down, or starting the process to break them down. We don't actually know where this stuff is going, but his relationship with Abigail, and something that was just a very small comment in the last episode when we were talking about Abigail, was her multiple escapes from the hospital at night. And we had seen one of those where she went to Hannibal, and I think that implication is pretty clear that she's been going to Hannibal. Like, he's steadily had those kinds of meetings with her, right? And we see the exact same thing with Will, and he's trying to blur Abigail's identity of being a killer, just like he's trying to blur Will's. Like, I think that's the way that he shows love. That's the way that he reacts to people he cares about, is he wants to change them into what he views as their best form. And in this case, he genuinely wants, like in the end of the last episode, like, he was hugging Abigail, right? Because she finally acknowledged that she helped her dad. She's becoming something else. Serial killers are always fascinated with this idea of transmutation or becoming. Autumn and I've been making a joke about it. Like, there's never been a good becoming. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody who's like, I'm becoming something else is like doing it in a good way.
Right.
And I feel like that's what he's doing here, is he wants Will to change, and he's forcing that change in several different ways. None of it's good. I'm not trying to defend this idea at all. I'm just
no.
Just definitely trying to, I guess, explore the character,
to offer a narrative.
Yeah, exactly. To have a narrative reason that he's doing this. I genuinely think, like, I guess my too long didn't read version is, I think he genuinely loves Will, and he wants Will to become the best person he sees that Will could be, which is probably not the best person that anybody can be, if that's what Hannibal is seeing. But that's how Hannibal is looking at it.
For sure. I guess I'm just, like, not understanding why he would endanger his life, because this is kind of a big deal. Like, what he's going through, like, it is a big deal, and like he needs
help. Yeah. And this is just so frustrating, because, like, with the syphilis thing that you were talking about, like, it's literally just medicine. Like, you just take some medicine and you're fine. Like, it's not like,
yes,
he could clear this up within a couple of weeks and Will would be fine. And Sutcliffe, as he meets Will after the scan, just bald-faced lies. Says his brain is fine neurologically. He can't diagnose any mental issues, of course, with scans. Like, that's all psychology work. And he offers to do more tests and blood work, but he says it's all going to be inconclusive. Just straight out bald-faced lying to Will about his own medical condition.
Right. Well, again, like, just kind of like the same way that your friend going to the ER about, like, her high blood pressure. Like, again, this is super enraging for me, because, like, in my research work, like we talked about, like, I deal with a lot of people who live with chronic pain. And the issue is that, like, a lot of the time, like, they have pain, but there's no diagnosis, or there's no quote unquote visible reason for the pain. And so they go to the doctor, they explain that they're in pain, and then if they're lucky, the doctor's going to do a scan, maybe some blood work, and then, oh, nothing's wrong, like, everything's fine, you have to see a psychologist, you have to see a psychiatrist, like, the pain is in your head, like, kind of thing. And like, the person, just like Will earlier, is like, no, I know that something's wrong with me. Like, we just haven't found it yet. Now, of course, like you said, like, the neurologist is, like, just bald-faced lying to Will, which makes it even worse, I think. But, like, this is such a common experience for people who have chronic illness. Like, it's awful.
Absolutely awful. We go from here to Jack and Hannibal drinking whiskey in Hannibal's office again. I'd love to know how they arrange these little dates. Like, is it text messages? Do they, you know what I'm saying? Like, what is the appropriate time for Jack to come over and drink whiskey and just, like, download into Hannibal? Like, what is this, like, is there a Facebook meeting? Like, is there a Google invite?
Know.
You know what I'm saying? Like, how does this?
I would love to know that.
their topic of conversation.
Maybe Hannibal has like one of those calendars that like you can book online, right?
Wow. Yeah. Absolutely.
Imagine.
Absolutely. I just picture like the text messages between Jack and Will.
I love that.
And just like neither one of them likes to text, so like they're so short on both sides. Like 11 p.m. drink question, yes. Response.
Just like need to talk about Will.
Yeah. Jack says that he needed to catch a killer. He had 8 dead college girls, and he needed Will to be able to catch that killer. And Hannibal points out that Will didn't only catch the killer, he caught the killer's disease. He can't stop thinking about what it is to take a life, which is, what we've seen with Will. Like, he literally can't stop thinking about it.
And this is also where Jack says that he'd rather Will go a little mad than having more people dying. And like, what the fuck? What is going on? Because he's plainly saying that he doesn't value Will's life and sanity as much as he does his job here, or like the lives of other people, right? And we've kind of been circling this conversation for a while here, but like, I know that I was like, well, maybe not. Like, I was kind of reluctant to say it out loud, but he is the one saying it out loud here. Like, he is the one who is like saying that, like, I would rather he go a little mad than like having to like not have him on my team, right?
I'd rather him go crazy.
It's out there
and like
yes!
and do his job. Like that's an insane thing for a manager to say.
But,
any kind of.
But that's exactly what they were saying earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they were talking about being broken and not broken, and Jack was like, "You're being rude," but like he is exactly saying that. He's saying, "I'd rather have him broken than deal with the other option." And I'm just like, how? I don't know. Like, how are these words coming out of your mouth right now? Like,
Jack insists that Will always survives the things that he sees, and I love Hannibal's correction of "not always" so far. Just a very good thing. And then Hannibal is like, "Oh, by the way, here's all of Will's medical records for you, Jack. Like, if you want to take a look through this, just you can have them."
Like, how is that not a HIPAA violation? Because, like, of course, like, if it's just, like, if Hannibal is just Will's friend and he's talking to his employer about his medical condition, he's just a shitty friend, right? But, like, if Hannibal is his psychiatrist, then explain to me how that is not a HIPAA violation. Of course, I think that Hannibal doesn't give a flying fuck about HIPAA. But yeah.
But
anyway.
You think Jack would have some concern, right? Like, he even...
No, he doesn't care. I don't think he cares.
Absolutely
He's made
not.
it clear that he doesn't care.
I mean, do you remember when... I can't remember the girl that got killed, that the Chesapeake Ripper killed.
Miriam
Lass, thank you.
Or, yeah, okay.
When he sent Miriam on that task where she was like, we need to look, and he's like, I can't be seen doing that because it's a HIPAA violation. Like, he couldn't get access to those records. And she's like, but I could do it and not get in trouble, like, or as much trouble. Like, he just clearly does not give a shit.
He only cares if he gets in trouble.
Yes.
That's what he cares about.
Hannibal has another beautiful line. This episode is full of them. When you take him to a crime scene, talking about Will, when you take him to a crime scene, the very air has screams smeared on it. And those places he doesn't just reflect, he absorbs. Yeah, dude, that's an intense thing. Like, we talk a lot about they talk a lot about Will's ability to be able to get into these, places that kill her. And he's often talking about reflections. And now Hannibal is rephrasing that as absorbing it. Like, he's bringing those people inside of him. And we've definitely seen that from the beginning with Garrett Jacob Hobbs. And now we're seeing it again with every single killer, where he has these more and more and more intense memories and visions of himself committing these murders.
It's funny because I have a line here, like I have a note, and it's like I'm like saying it in jest, but I think it's very, very true. Where like Hannibal is like, absorb me, Will.
Right?
Like, I think that's what's going on, really.
Well,
right? But with what you were saying earlier of like him wanting Will's like unfiltered, most base self of like coming out, I think that's what's going on. Like, he wants Will to become more like him.
Yes, absolutely. He wants Will to absorb him, and you can use that in any kind of way you want to. AO3, you get after it.
I know.
Take it and run, baby. Get after it. Tag your work appropriately. I want to see it.
I just want Mads to say this line: "Absorb me, Will."
God,
tell me, Will.
If Mads Mikkelsen had a cameo, that man would be.
Oh, poor guy!
Yes,
like,
yes.
would be paid to say the most bonkers shit.
Will decides to go back to the crime scene at night, and he goes into the house. He goes to the woman's room. For some reason, the lights aren't working. And in the room, he checks the time and reminds himself of when he is, where he is, and more importantly, who he is. I'm Will Graham. I'm in Delaware. It's 7:03 p.m. And again, I mentioned this as a through line, and like this is very much into the identity theme of just literally like, I'm here. I'm grounding myself. I have to remind myself of who, when, and where I am.
I mean, it's really too bad that this was kind of taught to him by someone who is actually literally torturing him. But this is actually a really good mindfulness technique. It's really good. Like when you're in the middle of like an anxiety moment or like any kind of like episode of any kind, like just reminding yourself of who you are and where you are. And like it can be very, very grounding. But yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
As Will is looking through the room, he realizes that there's someone under the bed, and she recoils at his flashlight, and runs out of the room. Will grabs for her, and the entire skin of her arm peels off. Really gruesome looking. And then all of a sudden, it's several hours later, and he's outside in the woods, and he does his ritual again, his mindfulness ritual of saying that when he is, where he is, and who he is. He looks at his watch. He's lost like 3 or 4 hours. And at the end of it, he says, "You're alive. If you can hear me, you're alive," talking directly to Georgia.
Right.
And
this is like one of the leaps that he makes, right?
Yes.
Because like there's nothing that really indicates this is going on, but he is making a leap here with this person, and he says that, and like I didn't get why he was saying that at all, because I was like, why is he saying that? I don't know, but I guess we'll see, because he's usually right. Just like Fox Mulder.
Just like Fox Mulder is usually correct, even if he has a bunker theory.
Yes, exactly.
Will calls Beverly. God, I wish Beverly was his therapist or his mom or just somebody that had a little bit
his
more
sister.
Control. Like maybe you can give her like medical power of attorney. That's what we need to do. Give Beverly medical power of attorney over Will.
I fucking wish, man. Honestly.
And he brought her over because he didn't want to obviously bring Jack into this thing, but he wanted to make sure that what he saw was real. And she takes this at face value and says, "Well, if you're not sure, let's prove that it is."
I think at this point, like I didn't even have it in me to pause and do the hamster walk. Like I was just like screaming at my laptop, like at Beverly to take him to a hospital. I was like, just get him another MRI, like by another doctor.
There's a note in the script that when Will says this, when he says, "I called you because I'm not entirely sure what I saw was real," it says the admission almost breaks her heart, but it doesn't show. And I think I'm going to start like kind of skimming through the scripts for stuff like that, especially when it comes to Beverly, because we don't get enough Beverly. And I just, if there's more in the script, I want more Beverly. So I'm gonna keep doing that because I think we have to. So he begins to tell her he doesn't remember at all what he did with the arm tissue, which is a problem. He describes the woman as deranged. And I think Beverly says here, she mutilated a woman's face because she thought it was a mask. And Will again makes another jump. She can't see faces. And she says, "Why did she come back?" Will says, "To prove to herself that she didn't kill her." And Beverly looks at Will and says, "Is that why you came back?" Again, Will knows that he didn't kill her, but also he's kind of worried that he thinks he does, right? Like, or he thinks he did. And it's again the script working overtime, or the dialogue working overtime, to kind of make this parallel between the killer and Will, right? Yes, absolutely. And Beverly says she's worried about him. She says, like, the FBI is talking about him. Like, he's a subject of speculation, that he's pushing himself over the edge that Jack led him up to. And Will, still caught in this moment of trying to figure out the killer as well as himself, says, "The killer can't accept her reality. I can occasionally identify with that." And like you said, we're definitely working overtime to make them twinsies. But at the same time, like, it's just so devastating to hear this man confess this, and to know that the people he's looking up to help him through this are not giving him the help that he needs.
Well, honestly, that's I think this is where, like, I know that we don't really do calls to action on this podcast, right? Like that's more like on Carrying Wayward. At the end of every episode, we're like, what does this episode make you feel called to? But if I had to do a call to action here, because I really felt it, I was like, I want to be the kind of person that like steps in situations like this. Because like throughout this entire episode, like I just sort of kept hoping for like a responsible adult, right, to like step in and be like, Will, you need help? And I was really, really hoping that Beverly would be that person. But she isn't, right? And nobody else does it, because Hannibal's certainly not going to do it. He's the one who's like orchestrating the torture, and Jack's not doing it either because like he doesn't care, really, I think is what we need to come to the conclusion to, which I don't like, because I kind of like Jack as a character, and I would want him to be better than he is. And like at the same time, like it's a lot to ask of Beverly, because she doesn't have any kind of power over him, right? Like she's not his superior. She's not a family member. She's not like, Will is also like a grown adult. Like he's got his own mind, his own knowledge of himself. And because Beverly respects that, she's not stepping in, right? So it's like this really weird line of her like probably feeling like she would be overstepping if she intervened, like especially when she knows that Jack's not doing anything about it, and she also knows that Will is seeing a psychiatrist, right? So like she's like, what the fuck? Why should I have to do anything about that, right? Like what is my word worth here?
Yes. As basically a work acquaintance, right? Like it'd be difficult to even call them friends at this point. Like we haven't seen them interact in any kind of social setting that would give us the impression that they're friends. Just a professional concern. And I think at first, like Beverly saw him as almost like a lab rat. Like she was kind of poking at him, and like you remember her adjusting his stance at the gun range and things like that, like intentionally invading his personal space a little bit to see what he would do. And now that I think her opinion or her idea of Will has changed as he's gotten worse. Like she definitely wants to take care of him. It just doesn't have a method to do so other than just showing up when he calls, right? Like I can't really do anything else. And it's like, you know, her in the script, like her heart breaks. Like it's something that she obviously deeply cares for this dude, even though they don't have that. It's just empathy, right? Like I guess ironically, it's a healthy form of what Will has if we think about it.
I know, right?
it's the ability to feel for somebody.
It's also super relatable, because I'm sure a lot of people have felt that, where they're like, oh my God, like this person needs help, but I don't know how to help them. Right? Like, oh, they probably have somebody else to take care of that. Or they probably, like, all the stories that we tell ourselves as to why, like, it's not up to us to intervene in, like, other people's lives, right? And all that is true. And I also want to be somebody who is more proactive when it comes to that. Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
You know, like just kind of thinking about all the times in my life where I wish that somebody had stepped in. Like, I don't know. Yeah, there you go.
I think that's meaningful. And also, like, anytime you want to do a call to action on this podcast, I'm fine. It's cool.
It was the first time that I felt really called to like do something, because I was like, and maybe
need to do something about
bringing it back to the theme of identity also, right? Like who the choices that you make, right, in your daily life, like tend to shape your identity a lot, and how you think of yourself, and also like the little choices that you make. Like, do you want to be the kind of person, I don't know, who has like a chocolate muffin for breakfast, you know, like, or do you want to be the kind of person who has like yogurt? Like, it has a lot to do with how we think of ourselves.
We go back to Hannibal's office, where Will is drawing yet another broken clock and reminding himself of who and where and when he is. He describes his feeling as chasing a ghost, both inside himself and the killer. And Hannibal says that he wants to run more tests on Will. And they begin to have this conversation, and Will starts it out with, "You wouldn't publish anything about me, would you?" And Hannibal pauses and says, if I did anything, it would be without names, and it would be abstracted so that nobody knows who you are. And Will says, "Just publish it posthumously." And Hannibal says, "After your death or mine." And Will just goes, "Whichever one comes first, man."
I know, right? Like, so weird. Anyway, first of all, like, just letting you know, Hannibal would have to lie his pants off in order to be able to publish anything there, because he would have to, like, not say that he did the MRI, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Which
absolutely.
I think in the States like would be on his file anyway. Anyway, I don't know how he would manage to publish this.
Yeah, there's a lot of medical
Ethically.
people online that are really frustrated with this episode because like the way that MRIs and stuff work, like you can't just like disappear them as a doctor. Like it's basically impossible.
Well, right, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely,
It's a really good thing.
It's a very good thing. But there's
Yes.
there's definitely a lot of people that like know how this stuff works online that are like, actually,
Yeah, right. Exactly. Especially in the States where like everything is organized in a way to like make sure that patients have access to this information, right?
for better or for worse. Yes, as we have talked about.
As we've learned, for better or worse. But right, like obviously this is a good thing overall. Yeah.
Hannibal suggests that the killer could have Cotard syndrome for the killer, not for Will, because the symptoms all fit. The killer is reaching out to somebody and felt betrayed, and Hannibal points out like she can't trust anything that she's seeing, so she definitely feels betrayed. Her mental illness won't let her. And boy, does that sound like somebody we know.
Okay, so first of all, I had never heard of Cotard syndrome, and so I was so horrified by this condition. Like that in and of itself was like enough to make me go on Medline and look up papers on it because I was like, I need to understand this. If I understand it, then it won't be as scary. Spoilers, it is still just as scary, frankly.
Y'all think she might be joking about this? She literally sent me like links to papers, medical papers. That are, and
Yes.
I just got a bombardment of DMs, and I opened it up, and I was like, Cotard, what is happening right now?
I'm so sorry.
No, don't be
like,
sorry. It was excellent. It was amazing.
So I looked it up, and basically, like, people who suffer from Cotard syndrome think that they are dead, or that they're ghosts, or that they're empty, like they're missing parts of their body. Which in and of itself is horrifying, right? And in one of the papers I read, the syndrome actually showed up in patients who had, like, you guessed it, anti-NMDAR encephalitis, which is exactly Will's diagnosis, right? So this idea of, like, making a parallel between the killer and Will is actually showing up in medical papers. And I'm like, I hate you all. I hate you all so much. Because this show does this funny, silly little thing where it like talks about Will and like, you know, makes this parallels with the killers. And so I dug a little bit deeper and I also found another paper called The Misidentification Syndromes as Mind Reading Disorders, right? And what is Cotard syndrome, you might ask? Yes, you guessed it. It is a misidentification syndrome where basically like the people see something in themselves that is not actually there, right? Like they recognize themselves when they look at the mirror, but they see their inside as like empty. If you've watched Criminal Minds, there was an episode where one of the monsters of the week, I guess, had Capgras syndrome, where like they see people's appearance, but they think that somebody else, like people have been replaced by somebody else, right? Which is very similar to like episode 2 of the X-Files for some reason. But in this case, like the woman was right? Like it wasn't mental illness, like her husband, something had been done to her husband. But anyway, this kind of made me think back to when you asked me about like Will's ability for empathy and where I think he gets that ability from. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know, because this is like predates like when he was like working for Jack. And now I'm like, is the encephalitis what is that the thing that makes him see other people's like intentions more clearly? And I just,
or could
I
it be
hate
heightening
all
that
of
ability,
this.
right? Like
Heightening, yes,
so
there
like,
you go, heightening that ability.
If there's something, because we've seen it get more and more intense over the episodes,
Yes.
right? Like that first episode, he almost had like control over it. Going back specifically to the pilot episode where in the cold open, he's going through the motions of the killer, and then he stops at the alarm panel and pulls himself out of it and asks questions and then puts himself back into it. And in that episode, like, we saw him doing all of this stuff, like, around police, like, people were around him. And slowly but surely, like, they've started clearing rooms. They were putting plastic sheets on bed so he could lay down. Like, all of this has gotten more and more intense for him. And you have to imagine that the encephalitis has something to do with that. As that fucking medical edition has gotten worse, it's made him worse. And yes, I agree with you. I hate all of this.
I hate it so much, and it's so good.
It's so good.
How good it is.
Yeah, that's the problem with the show, is that it just makes you feel so many things, and none of them are very good. It just makes you feel, it's so good.
Yeah. But that's the point, right? Like, to be clear, that is the point of the show. The point of the show is to make you feel horrified, and I am horrified. Therefore, good job, show.
Good job, show. Yeah, absolutely. If you could make me hate somebody as much, like, it make me genuinely care about. I have a thing. I talk about it a lot, where Autumn is one of the few people that can actually make me angry. Because she's the only person whose opinion I really give a shit about, for the most part.
Fair enough.
So like, if other people have like a problem with me, I'm like, whatever, dude. It's like that thing that who's the kid that plays Spider-Man now? I can never remember that dude's name.
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland. Like, he had a viral video go like, if you have a problem with me, text me. If you don't know my number to text me, then you don't have a problem with me. Like, it's one of those things. I don't know where I was going with this, but yeah.
No, but I think it relates to, like, the fact that we hate it because we love it.
Yes,
like, it's not one of those, like, I hate it, therefore I'm going to stop watching. It's more like, this is so good that they are manipulating. Like,
yeah, if you could make me care about somebody so much to make me mad at a fictional character, you have done an excellent job. Like, that is amazing.
Right. I think I just want to be clear, because, like, obviously I have a hate on for this episode, but it's to manage to make me angry about this. Like, good job.
Yes,
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. To be this emotional about something is what I want from fiction. Is what I want from media. To make me feel this way. We get an image of Will sleeping at home, sweating. We probably have a good reason to know why he's so sweaty when he sleeps, right? Like, dude's probably running a constant 90. Take him to a doctor. The dude's probably running a constant fever. Jesus Christ. We see Georgia outside of his window. Meanwhile, Jack and the team have done some, like, research or whatever. It doesn't matter. They have found Georgia's mother. And she begins to describe the difficulty of raising somebody with Cotard syndrome. The medical visits, the seizures, the hallucinations, the uncertainty, spending months trying to figure out what was wrong, basically having just people guessing at what could possibly be the diagnosis. And her voice begins to break as she describes, like, mostly what I learned was how little we know about mental illness. It's mostly about managing expectations. And the camera is, like, we're definitely cutting back to Jack and Will, like, sharing looks with one another as we describe this. Right. Like, again, we've talked about a lot of them comparing Will with Georgia, and that's exactly what's happening here, even more intensely. And later, after the mom is gone, Will and Jack are in his office, and Will asks, "Are you managing your expectations?" And Jack begins to describe what he felt after Miriam last had died, feeling responsible for her death, and coming to his office and, you know, maybe thinking about resigning. And he kind of feels the same way about Will, and even says, "I broke the rules with Miriam, and I'm breaking the rules with you now." Fuck off, Jack.
Well, so that's kind of the thing, right? So he's saying all these things out loud, and yet he's doing nothing about it. Therefore, the status quo must suit him, right? Because if he knew that he was breaking the rules, then, like, take him to a fucking hospital.
Yes.
Like, get him looked at,
yes.
right? Like, get him looked at by somebody independent from Dr. Lecter. Like, if you are that worried, if you are equating, again, like I've said this before, that, like, Will reminds him of Miriam, but, like, if you are so worried about Will that you are comparing him to somebody that you got killed, then do something about it. Take action. Step in.
Right? Absolutely. Like, do something for
Be that responsible adult for him, right?
I mean, like, there's something obviously going on. And obviously, like, Hannibal isn't working. Like, you should be able to see that and go, like, okay, we need to do something besides do something for Hannibal. And man, Jack has another just really shitty comment where he says, "Why are you still here when the both of us know this is bad for you?" Like, putting that responsibility on Will, when he has specifically told Will that he can't quit, that people will die if he quits. And even now, as as he asked Will that, he's like, you found stability in this work. And Will describes himself as not feeling stable at all, like feeling like his entire world is built on, I think he says sand or something, like a movable surface, so it doesn't, it's not stable. And it's so frustrating to hear Jack's response of, I am bedrock. When you doubt yourself, you don't have to doubt me too. And this is I think another callback to what Alana said about Hannibal in regards to Abigail, of like, Abigail can't be lying because Hannibal backs her up on everything. I have no reason to disbelieve Hannibal. And here it's such a weird twisting of this, because Jack is saying that he's bedrock, that he can believe him, but he's gaslighting Will so badly with all of this. You can't go back to teaching because that won't be enough for you. People will die if you don't continue to do this. It's just Jack sucks so much in these moments, man. I hate this so much.
But this is why, like, I can understand that some people are going to have a problem with me using the word abuse here, because, like, for a lot of reasons. But this is abuse, right? Like, this is literally somebody telling, like, there is a parallel to be made here between what Jack is doing to Will and some like intimate partner violence, where like one partner will tell another, like, you're nothing without me. I am your foundation. I am your bedrock. Like, nothing will be good enough, like, for you after me. Like, this is what we're seeing. Right. And I just, like you said, Jack sucks in these moments.
Jack sucks so bad in these moments.
Yeah.
And even worse, Will seems to like accept this. Like he takes this in, and I feel like he's like internalizing this and going, okay, I can rely upon Jack. And it's not as bad as relying on Hannibal. Like, it's not quite as bad, but it's also
not quite as bad.
Pretty bad in terms of just his direct healthiness and mental health. We cut over.
Well, I think it's also because he doesn't have sorry. It's just he doesn't have the wherewithal right now to be like, no, Jack, like,
yes.
This is not correct, right? He just doesn't have it in him because he is sick.
Because he's literally sick.
He is literally sick. He's been sweating out a fever every fucking night. I'm sorry. Okay, I gotta stop. Okay, we're already like 2 hours into this recording. I gotta stop.
Meanwhile, Hannibal is entertaining Sutcliffe, serving him dinner as Hannibal likes to do. I like to think that this is an actual pig, not a human, but who knows at this point.
I don't know. Like, I've been watching because they're talking about Iberico ham, and usually Iberico ham is like a thing, like it's a special controlled like appellation, right? You can't call anything Iberico ham. And I've been watching season 4 of Only Murders in the Building, and it just kind of reminded me, like, there's a scene where Martin Short like sees a ham that's like hanging from a shower rod, and he just goes, "Oh my God, is that a person?" And like the other character is like, "Don't be ridiculous, it's a ham." And I'm just like, I'm sorry, but as someone who is currently watching Hannibal, this is a legit question, okay? Like,
I need to watch Murders in the Building at some point. Absolutely.
It's very sweet. I like it a lot.
They go back and forth, especially on like how Iberico ham is chosen, and how how it's only a certain amount of ham, only a certain amount of pigs, and it's a very rarefied thing. And Sutcliffe asked Hannibal that, well, now that we know where Iberico gets his pigs, how did you get yours? And the look that Hannibal gives this man of just, I am going to kill you in the worst way as soon as I am done with you. Just immediately deciding right there and then, like, I'm going to, like, how dare you call my husband the pig? Like, absolutely. Like, I could experiment. I will allow you to experiment upon him. You will not get his name out of your mouth. You can experiment, like, you can do medical gaslighting all day long, but you will not call him names. Absolutely not.
Right. Hannibal is literally like, I can excuse medical gaslighting.
I draw
the line. I'm calling my boyfriend a pig.
I hope we're never in court listening to this podcast back and like having to justify the things that we have said we excuse.
I know, right?
Hannibal talks about Will very fondly here, talking about his pure empathy once again, saying that imagination is an excellent accelerant for a fever.
Jesus Christ.
And they talk about him asking for more tests, and Hannibal just kind of casually says, now that we've confirmed what it is, it will be easier to hide from him. And I am screaming. This is probably the 3rd or 4th time I've seen this episode. I'm still screaming about it. It's just the worst.
I was past, like, the hamster walking around my apartment was just not enough anymore. Like, I was just seething. Like, yeah, there you go. I'm gonna say it again, but like, I can excuse cannibalism, but I dropped the line at medical gaslighting. Like, I can't deal with it. I'm sorry. Like,
Will is having another MRI done, but this time when he comes out of the machine, there's nobody around. So he gets dressed. He goes to the control room, which is empty. He heads to the doctor's office, and he sees that there's blood on the handle. He uses his jacket to open it, which I don't think that's like any better at this point. I guess it doesn't leave prints, but like as far as contaminating the crime scene, and inside is the doctor, Sutcliffe, with his face basically sawed in half.
yeah,
Like his very much like the killer that Georgia did to Beth in the cold open. Very, very brutal. There's kind of a weird moment here where Will sees this and is like, "Hey, Doc," like I'm like, "Dude, the guy is fucking dead. How can you not? How can you not see this?"
I mean, I think it makes sense, right? Like, as I've heard people talking about like experiences where like the person, like, they were seeing a dead person, right? Like, there was a dead person in front of them, and they just, like, their brain couldn't register that the person was dead. Mm-hmm. So it made sense, but it is quite funny. Like, I'm like, he can't answer you, Will. Like, he's gone. Like, he's not there anymore.
He's so obviously dead.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he doesn't register it.
Exactly. We skip ahead in time. So our Jack and the ERT crew are here. Beverly is doing her job in the books, which is looking for fibers. I always like it when this happens because in the TV show she does everything, but in the book she's like Beverly is specifically a fiber person. So she like looks over his clothes and says, "You're clean," and he says, "I don't feel clean." And Beverly reassures him, like, there's no way you could have done this without having stuff all over you. And I just want to mention that, or note that for a couple minutes in the future when we see what Hannibal is wearing when he's doing this.
My God.
They also find a murder weapon, which has the same tissue that they found on the murder weapon of Beth. And they start asking Will, like, why? What is happening? And Will's like, I don't remember any confusion. Maybe Georgia thought that the doctor was me. And Jack just specifically says, "Why you?" And Will says, "I have a habit of collecting strays. I tried to tell her she was alive, and maybe she heard me. Maybe it hadn't occurred to her in a while." And I guess just like comparing and contrasting this with the stuff that the mom was saying about having to go through all of the diagnoses and everything, and then just literally like having somebody tell you that you're alive for the first time in weeks or months,
or years, really.
Yeah, who knows how long she's been out, right? Like we don't really I don't think they mention how long she has been missing or out on her own, and it's just so terrifying and heartbreaking.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. Like, it's just like you were seeing this person who's been abandoned, like not only by the medical community but also by her family and society as a whole, right? And this is also how I feel about Will right now. Like, I feel like he's being left behind. Like, he is so vulnerable in this moment of being left behind. And he's like, yeah, I'll talk about that later, but like, he's doing something that I just love here, like reminding her that she's alive.
We cut to Will at home, asleep, sweating again. His pile of dogs begin to growl and bark, and as he awakes and realizes that Georgia is under his bed. He's scared at first, but then he begins to talk to her. "I see you. Think of who you are. And he does the thing that he's been doing to ground himself of when she is and where she is and who she is, and saying, "You're not alone." And Georgia, in a very heartbreaking way, says, "Am I alive?" And it's so funny because, like, obviously, like, we gave Jake, like, I bought the soundtrack and like ripped it and gave those tracks to Jake to remix for us for the podcast. But I've used them so much in the podcast now while I'm editing that it's not Hannibal music to me anymore. Like, it's just podcast music. Yeah. So when the actual track started playing, I was like, "What is this? Why are you using my music?" Wait a minute.
I was like, "Oh my God, that's our music!"
He reaches a hand for her, and she reaches out and takes it. And yeah, like this is just a really touching moment, I think.
And I think it's because like one of the reasons why this moment hits so hard for me anyway, like I don't want to speak for anybody else, but like we've been talking so much about like how I'm just hoping for a responsible adult to step in for Will, and here Will is that person for Georgia, right? Like he is the adult who steps in and who is like, you are alive. Like I am reaching out to you because I know that you have been reaching out to others and nobody has been listening to you, but I am here for you. I know what's wrong with you. Let me help you. And it's giving me hope that someone is going to step in for Will, right? Because the show does that thing. Right, exactly. Like, because the show does that thing where like, again, like these parallels and so I'm like, foreshadowing and whatnot, and I'm like, I just hope that someone is going to step in for Will, and I don't know.
I keep telling you, it's going to get better. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's going to be.
I don't believe.
And the next episode, the next episode is titled "Will Gets Antibiotics," and it's just going to be a fun time. And everybody has it's the French version of Will Gets Antibiotics. I don't know how to say that in French.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. We see her after this in a, I believe this is an anaerobic chamber, like what they would treat a fire victim with, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, like where there's hardly any oxygen. And then we cut over to Hannibal, who's telling Jack, again, HIPAA violations, but like, here's what Georgia is going through. Here's, she's going to recover in time. She'll get treatment. We can treat this disease that she has. But he's far more concerned about Will. But Jack, like, kind of dismisses the Will stuff and is like, I want to know what she knows, what she saw, what she remembers. And we get this flashback of Georgia walking into the doctor's office, into Sutcliffe's office, and seeing Hannibal. We see his cute little plastic suit for the first time.
You were so excited about that. You were like, oh my God, you saw his plastic suit for the first time. I was like, yes. I didn't even think about it, but yes, it was there.
I love it. The reason I love it so much is because everything that he does, we've talked about this, he does with such intensity. And it's like, it's so over the top, the way he dresses, the way he cooks, the way he drinks, the way he kills. He does it with this like like what did Will say earlier, a grandiosity to it, right? And this little plastic suit is such a dorky, nerdy thing. Like he looks like and he makes it work for him. Like it's kind of terrifying when you see him in the little plastic suit, but also it's just very dorky. And I love the fact that it is like he has little booties on his shoes, so his shoes don't get messed up. And like just the idea of him putting all this stuff on, and dressing up in his little murder outfit, it's so cute.
But like, here's the thing, right? Like, I feel like there would be so many other options available. Like, you could use like a fishing jacket or something. Like, but he's like, no, this is ugly. I want people to. I want people's last. I want the people I kill. I want their last vision to be of the way that I dress.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, I want them to see my clothes. And so he picks like the transparent little plastic suit. And I'm just like, this is so extra.
It is.
He's such a drama queen.
We should also note that when she walks in, this is a very like gruesome scene. Like he's cut this man's face open, and he's literally like using all of his strength, and like not just like one pump, but like forcing it down like several pumps to pry this man's face and like his whole fucking head apart. And it's so gruesome in its casualness. Like he's just like treating this body as a piece of meat, really, I guess, for not to put too much of a point on it, but like he's just like, it's just like nothingness to him that he can manipulate. And it's even just for that casual gruesome, it's bad. And in the middle of this, he notices someone coming. He smells Georgia as she comes in. And as he walks over to her, we realize how her condition is visualized, which she can't see faces. So his face is just a kind of a bad CGI blur, if we're being honest. Like I think it works, but it's also like not great CGI. So
the CGI is bad, but like the effect works, right? Narratively.
Absolutely. And even like sometimes bad CGI can be better than good CGI, and I think this is one of those cases where it does look a little off, but the offness actually works for like everything that's happening in the episode.
It's otherworldly almost.
Exactly, yeah. And he just walks over to her and hands her like the scissors that he was using to like take this man's face apart, and she just grabs it and is like, okay. And then Hannibal leaves. That's it. And of course, we started this flashback with Jack wondering what she remembers, and we end the flashback with it going to Georgia in her anaerobic chamber in the present, and we fade out from there. And she looks so much better than she did already. Like, she's obviously she looked corpse-like when we first see her. Now she's beginning to look more human-like, and we fade from here to the credits.
Okay, couple of things.
Yes,
because
let's get into it.
Okay, so I have come to realize that Jack's instincts when it comes to police work are very, very good, because he was right immediately about Abigail, right? Like, he knew from the get-go. And so the fact that he immediately knows that he wants to talk to Georgia because he's like, she knows something, right? So that, like, I thought that was a really cool moment of them showing, like, that he has excellent instincts when it comes to that, although he can't see Hannibal for some reason, which I'm like, how does that work with his identity, right? Like, how does that make sense? So I'm excited to kind of see that, the progression of that. And also, I was, again, like, really kind of shocked to see Hannibal doing this to somebody that he's known for so long. And it kind of comes back to the conversation that we had before about love and attachment, because I'm like, he clearly has no emotional attachment to people, right? Like, you would assume that, like, one would assume that killing somebody that you've known for this long would be, like, a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
But no, like, he is, like you said, he is literally, like, defacing the body of this person that he has known for so long, right? And wow.
Yeah, literally ripping the tongue out, the tongue that was used to smear his husband's name. Like,
I know. I know.
And I find it fascinating.
Like, you will never speak that again.
When I talked earlier about Hannibal and his, like, the way that he views people, at least my interpretation of it. I'm not saying that this is 100% right or anything, just the way that I see it. Like, I mentioned, like, he found Alana interesting, right? Like, she's almost kind of a distraction with some of the stuff, because he just finds her interesting for whatever reason. And I feel like Sutcliffe was the same way. Sutcliffe was, a doctor. Like, they mentioned that they were in, like, a residency together. He's known for a long time. Like, I would almost assume, like, they maybe had done some dirt in the past, like maybe not to this degree, but, like, something about it. So, like, he found Sutcliffe interesting in that way. But as soon as he made himself not useful, Hannibal turned on him and had no reason to not kill him at that point.
But I agree with you that, like, there must have been some stuff in the past, because, like, you don't go from, like, just being friends in residency to, like, hiding a condition from a patient, like, just like that. Like, 100%. There has to be escalation, right? And knowing Hannibal, he probably conditioned him for years,
of course,
right, to do this. So, like, I absolutely believe that, and that would also make a great, like, other story, right?
Yeah. Somebody needs to write that fiction, like the history of Hannibal. Honestly,
I love that.
Thomas Harris wrote the history of Hannibal, and it's a fucking terrible book, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. So maybe we don't need it. Yeah. The last Hannibal book. I don't know how true this is. This is just going by, like, Wikipedia and, like, some third party statements. Apparently, he was at risk of losing the rights to Hannibal if he didn't write a book.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was kind of forced into writing it, and it's basically, like, follows Hannibal as a child and to his teenage years and things like that. And it's just not. I don't know. It's just not. It's not what you want out of a Hannibal book at all. So.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No, I think it would be interesting to see, hey, it'd be like General Hospital, but Hannibal is there or something, right? Like, not General Hospital.
That would be really cool, actually.
What's the long-running medical series that...
Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah. Put
ER?
Yeah. Put Hannibal on Grey's Anatomy for, like, 2 seasons, just to mix it up a little bit, right?
Oh,
like,
my God, yeah.
Sorry.
Unbelievable. I would love that.
We're at the end of...
Change the tone.
We're at the end of the episode, and I feel like I need to ask you, was this a cathartic experience? Are you ready for the next episode? Or are you still extremely mad at Hannibal and everything that's been happening?
I like Hannibal significantly less.
So, the show or the character?
Oh, the character.
Yeah,
That's
what I thought.
love the show. I think that the show does this really, really well, where, like, at the beginning, like you're you can easily be sympathetic to Hannibal, right? You're like, oh, whatever, he eats people. It's just people who are rude. But then you start seeing how he actually is, and you're like, oh shit. And again, I think I've said this a few episodes ago where I'm like, maybe the goal of Hannibal, the character, is to like bring out the worst in people. And I think maybe like through watching this, like we as viewers are learning about the worst in ourselves as well. And maybe that's why like some of these things hit home as much as they do, right? Yeah.
You know, you say the worst, but Hannibal might say it's the best part of you. The one that likes Hannibal so much. The one that is super
absolutely.
into the character.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, I think this is a shocking episode, specifically because of just the realization, like, or at least the underlining of just how terrible Hannibal can be, right? Like just how casually cruel he can be, and how he doesn't particularly. Obviously, he has a totally different set of morals than anybody around him. Like he doesn't view himself in the same way as a part of society. That, you know, we have these unspoken agreements and these like social, you know, constructs that we all operate in, and this episode really, really brings home that he is not in any of that stuff. Like none of this stuff really matters to him. What matters to him are the people around him that he cares about, which are only two people so far, right? This is just Abigail and Will. And when you realize like what that care looks like, what it looks like in real life, it's fucking horrifying. And man, just a brutal realization of this. And boy, is it going to get more interesting, because we're getting close to the end of season 1, Mary. And
I know. I'm actually so scared about the next episode. Like I know that not that I don't want to say it like it's a chore or anything like that, but like I know that I have to go and watch it, and I want to go and watch it, right? Like but I'm just like, I am so scared. And I know that Will survives this because that like he has to be in like season 2 and 3, and I know that there are 3 seasons, but I'm just like, I don't know how much more of this I can take.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up what actually happens in this episode. Oh, okay.
Oh no.
Okay, well, this is going to be an interesting episode to test your level of goretude, how much you can stand, how much body horror you can stand.
But you know, it's interesting because so far, I like the body horror has been like a
secondary thing, right? Yeah,
totally, because that's not what is most horrifying to me. But I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so next one is a tough one.
Next one is a tough one. Yeah. I'm gonna.
Okay, all right.
I'm excited about. I can't wait to watch it tonight. To be honest with you, it's gonna be so much fun. With that in mind, do you want to head to our review section?
Absolutely. Would you like to get us started with your review?
Absolutely. I'm going to give this episode 4 stars. An absurd amount of dishes and flavors makes this buffet froid. I think I said that wrong again. Buffet froid.
No, you said it right.
One of the finest we've experienced, allowing us to choose among the despicable delights that it holds.
Despicable delights? Oh my god, I love that so much. I'm going to use that on Twitter, actually. Let me write that down. I love it. Okay. I will also give it 4 stars because with its roller coaster of flavorful dishes, this buffet froid offered us some almost unlimited options and was decidedly frustratingly delicious.
I just want to thank everybody for listening to the podcast. We've had just a delightful amount of feedback and just seeing numbers tick up, seeing people comment on it, seeing the stuff that people tweet at us. It means so much to us. Like it means a lot to us. So thank you for continuing to listen. You can find the podcast and all of its social media links and things like that at rudeeats.cool. if you could subscribe to us on YouTube, we promise not to blow up your feed too much. Like, we're going to do basically one post a week. But if we can get to 100 subscribers, we could actually have like a Rude Eats YouTube URL. But right now we're at like 50. So I'm putting out the call. If you can get us up to 100, I would really appreciate it. Just because I want the cool URL that doesn't mean anything and nobody will ever see. But I want it. So.
No, but we care.
But we definitely care.
Please help us get there.
Mary, where can you be found on the internet these days?
I can be found on Twitter at MaryTurner_. You can also find my Supernatural podcast at Carrying Wayward, as well as my Gentleman Pirates library at Gentleman Pirates Library, which is I was going to say Only Murders in the Building, but no, Our Flag Means Death podcast. Yes.
Excellent. Would recommend both of those podcasts highly. You can find me on the internet on Twitter at JG Greer. I do most of my tweeting nowadays on Blue Sky, which is jeremy.greer. Whatever the end of Blue Sky stuff is, but you should be able to find it just by typing in Jeremy Greer. Can't imagine there's like multiple Jeremy Greers on Blue Sky at this point. You can also find all of my podcasts at creepybutnecessary.cool. I do podcasts on Supernatural, X-Files, Merlin, and a variety of other things. So please go check all of that out. Once again, thank you for listening. And as we leave you with this episode, we only have one thing to say, which is bon appetit.
Bon appetit, everybody. I saw the title. You should put Rude Eats Mary's version 2 hour
2 hour syndicate.
Because it's because the Taylor Swift one is the 10-minute, because it's 10-minute version. All too well. Hold on. What is it called? 10-minute version, Taylor's version is what it's called. So 2 hour version, Mary's version. 2 hour and a half. Oh my God. Unbelievable.
I figured this one was going to be, I don't think the next one will be as this deep, but it is going to be fun to talk about. It's going to be kind of horrifying. But Will's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. It's all good. It'll be good.
I don't believe you.
You should
I don't believe you. I've seen too many screen caps of this man covered in blood that I haven't seen yet.
It's fine.
To believe that he's going to be fine.
It's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Who doesn't get dipped in blood every once in a while? It's just a part of doing business. You know what I'm saying?
Of course. Who doesn't gut fish and in their kitchen has like a pool of blood?
It's the cutting fish in the kitchen. It's like repairing the motor in your living room. Like, what are you doing, Will? Like, I don't understand.
Lounging around in a whorish manner.
Yeah, while repairing a boat motor that looks older than me. Like, what are you?
Yes, I know. I love him so much. Maybe it's the encephalitis that's like making him.
Maybe so. Maybe he does have a fish cleaning station outside, and he just kind of forgot about it. He's like, I got to be too intense about this right now.
He's being more of a weird gremlin about stuff.
Right.
All right. I know that you have to go watch
X-Files.
What is it?
Yes.
X-Files now.
And then
the one where they kill an elephant. Yes.
Yeah, I'm excited.
You're gonna hate that episode. I'm just telling you right away.
Yeah, I saw the chat.
From what I've heard from your podcast, you're gonna hate it because it makes no sense. But it's the X-Files. That's what they do.
Oh, it's fun. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fun. I saw in the chat someone saying like maybe Jeremy and Chris can make this be funny, and I was like, okay, so it's gonna be one of those episodes. So Chris will definitely be yelling. Hopefully, if we can make that happen.
You guys are gonna do that thing where like you're like, what is it you call it, insufferable for a whole.
Oh yeah, we're
like,
just gonna be insufferable. So, absolutely. I've
yes.
already tried to turn like the last episode into an MCU podcast. So like we're gonna be on our best behavior, I'm sure.
Excellent. Those are the funny episodes, I find.
Well, this was a delight. Not a despicable delight, just a normal delight. Thank you so much. These episodes are increasingly more and more fun to record, so I'm very happy we're doing this.
Yeah, same. Same.
And let me know when you're ready to watch the next one. Just let me know what happens.
I'm so scared. I might start it soon, but I have stuff that I have to do. Anyway, I'll see. But we'll see. Now I'm like, I need to know. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that.
I'm sorry, and you're welcome.
Okay.
Have a great Sunday. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And how are you today?
Oh, better now that I've had some coffee, but it was a rough morning.
It's a little sluggish this morning, huh?
Yeah, and I'm not even sure why. Like, I went to bed like at a regular normal person hour, actually like old person hour, and I just like I don't know. It's like my sleep is not restorative at the moment.
Yeah, I've been having like this weird back pain, and
Oh no.
yeah, so like I don't know, like at 3 this morning, I was like tossing and turning, trying to get comfortable, and finally was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna go like sit on the couch with a pillow behind my back or something, and
Yeah.
and then I did that thing where like you close your eyes and time passes, and like you're not awake, but you're not really asleep. Like I don't think I hit REM, so I just
I hate that so much.
yeah. Like, I'm not awake enough to do anything productive, and I'm not sleepy enough to go all the way to sleep. So I'm just going to lay here with my eyes closed in a dark room like a fucking crazy person. So.
I feel like that's what my grandparents used to do. Like, you know, like they would just like sit down on the couch and like close their eyes. And then you'd be like, ah, ha, ha, you're sleeping. And then they're like, no, I'm not actually sleeping.
Yeah. My grandmother was the queen of, I'm just resting my eyes. I'm just resting my
Yes.
eyes. And like, you're doing what? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. What are you talking about, mama?
But isn't that what you were doing, though?
That's exactly what I was doing. Yeah, now as you know, now that I'm not a 13-year-old asshole anymore, I can.
You can be like, oh, I understand what she was doing all this time.
I have definitely had in the last couple of years had thoughts about just like the way that I treated adults when I was a child, where I just didn't understand or like, why don't you think this new piece of music is just the most amazing thing you haven't heard? And like not realizing that they've spent 40 years listening to music and they're probably just kind of tired of new music, right? Like, so, and I just think about it sometimes now because I don't know about you, but the older I get, the harder it is to like, really embrace new stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
And
to embrace new stuff.
I really try because I don't want to become one of those people that's like, oh, I only listen to the Eagles from 1978. Like, I don't want to be that person.
I mean, if I'm being honest, like a lot of the music that I listen to is the stuff that I listened to like in the early 2010s. Like, and that hasn't changed. Like, I'm just happy staying in like my 2010s pop, like, and I'm just very happy there.
Yeah. I've got a lot of early aughts hip hop that I listen to that I just keep going back to over and over again. And luckily, those dudes are still making new music. So, like in 2020, I'm like,
that's
oh
cool.
yeah, thank you for making a new record, Dose One. I appreciate that.
Well, that's the cool thing about liking Taylor Swift.
Sure, she's constantly making new music.
Always new music, and it still kind of has a similar feeling to what she was doing early on. So it's I don't know. I like it. I'm happy about it.
I got to say, with the recent drama with Chapel Roan, just being, and I see that it pops up on my FYP where I see people comparing and contrasting her and Taylor and other pop stars, and I'm just like, number one, like, why are you pitting the pop girlies against each other? Like, nobody
always like that.
Nobody needs that. And number two, like, I don't know, if I was sick, I wouldn't want to go to work. If I need a mental health day. I'm sorry that my work is like entertaining 1,000 people on stage, but like also I need a mental health day. Like, I'd leave her alone.
And also, can we just talk about the fact that Taylor Swift literally wrote an entire album about how suicidal she was, about like, specifically because she was forced to perform while she was in a mental health crisis. Like, awful. How are we pitting her against Chapel Roan? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, she is literally talking about the same experience, and she's saying, pushing through almost killed me.
And
do you really think that she would want Chapel Roan to push through? Like, anyway, I don't get it.
And I mean, I can't help but go back to like, the Britney Spears stuff, like when that was happening in the media, and that she was being called a crazy person, and like the way that was treated, I look back and I'm like, oh, I should have probably been more observant and realized what was happening. Like instead, it was just really easy to buy into. Oh, the pop star is crazy, but I look back now and I'm like, oh, like that chick was going through a legitimate crisis and she had no idea how to deal with it. And then you look at what Chapel has dealt with since, like, it's one of those situations where she became, you know, an overnight sensation, but she worked there for 10 years to get there, right? Like, all of this huge fame and stuff absolutely changes a person, and it has to be like an overwhelming amount of pressure. I can't imagine it. I really can't.
Well, she was basically saying in an interview not too long ago that, like, all the things that she liked, like going to the park, going, like, out with her friends at the bar, like, things that, like, a 20-something person would do and like to do. She's like, I can't do any of that anymore. And she's like, I have no more outlet for being a person. And this is something that Taylor Swift also talks about a lot. She's like, I feel like I'm no longer a person.
Yeah, because you're too famous. Right? Yeah.
Because you're too famous. Like, you are a thing. You have become a thing to people.
I have to imagine how difficult it is just not being able to go somewhere, right? Like, just not, I just want to go do something and I have to put on a full fucking disguise to do it. Like, that seems like an insane thing. And it's genuinely got to be like for all of the advantages that you have with the money and everything like that.
Of course.
It's just, you still don't really, like, you're like forced into this weird life. And it's just, I can't imagine it. Like, it just has to be so hard.
I feel like fame, like, there is a balance of fame where, like, you're famous enough that, like, people ask you for your autograph when you're getting coffee versus, like, swarming you when you're trying to, like, go somewhere, right? Like, there has to be a balance.
Yes.
And I don't know why, but I'm thinking back to this conversation that I had with Sadie Witkowski, I think, on Carrying Wayward, about parasocial relationships. And she was saying that, like, the supernatural actors are, like, the right level of famous where, like, they can still go places without being harassed, but, like, they still get, like, the freebies when they go out, kind of thing, you know?
Sure.
And I'm like, yeah, that's the right level of fame. Like, that, I wouldn't want anything more than that ever. If even that, like, the fewer people recognize me at the grocery store, the better. Like, I don't even like running into people I know at the grocery store, you know?
Yeah, I don't want to talk to anybody at the grocery store.
No.
I ran into my neighbor at the grocery the other day, and, like, we saw each other and we both did, like, the head nod and, like, just kind of moved on past. And I was like, thank you for not, like, engaging me in some, like, weird conversation about it. How's the neighborhood going or whatever. Like, I just don't. No. I'm just there to pick up my tacos and then leave. I just want my taco fixings and I got to get out of here.
I get that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's, you know, podcasting is a thing where, like, we obviously do this for fun, right? Like, we don't get paid. We do not get paid to do this. Like, and the reward, as you have often joked, is, like, being perceived, right? Like, having people listen to the podcast and enjoy it, getting that feedback where people are like, oh, this made me think of something that I'd never thought of, or I've such enjoyed this, or, you know, having you like having that relationship with the listener. And I was watching, there's this new Netflix show with Kristen Bell and some other dude. It's like a little romantic comedy kind of thing. And I guess her job is to podcast, and, like, they're trying to make this, like, $1 million deal with Spotify to sell their podcast. And I'm just like, they had 119 episodes and they're selling their podcast. And I'm just like, what?
Like, that's not how that works.
What? But at the same time, like,
God.
As much as I would, it's a weird thing because, like, as much as I would want Monster of the Week to get popular, or as much as I want Root Eats to become popular, like, where is that line between popular and, like, a little too popular? Like, if we were a podcast that was getting 100,000 views on TikTok or something, and, like, had an enormous amount of content or comments, and people were just paying that close attention to us, it would be a little unnerving. I'd be like, maybe we should back off. I don't know.
It's honestly, like, there are sometimes, like, so in the past, I've actually taken a huge step back from TikTok because it was taking a toll on my mental health, because of Carrying Wayward. Like, I was the one who was manning it, and
you were getting, like, a lot of engagement on that platform too. Like, you had a lot of people.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
that's how a lot of people like found out about us or like discovered us, you know, like, and that's how we managed to grow our podcast. And since we don't engage on there anymore, like we have seen like our quote unquote numbers slow down, which I kind of hate saying, but it's true. Like it's a fact. But there was so much attention, like, and sometimes so much hatred on, and I was just like, I can't deal with this anymore. Like, and I don't know, like the scrutiny I feel that Carrying Wayward has been under, and I don't know if you guys have lived that with Monster of the Week, but like we've had conversations where I was just like, I don't really understand why there's so much scrutiny on like the details of the things that we say. But yeah, I don't know. I've never actually like openly talked about this, and I know that this is going to go out, and I'm like keep being very careful because obviously I want people to pay attention. But like sometimes I just felt like there was so much scrutiny on the things that we would say that like I was just like, how, why? Like I don't know.
Yeah, I would. First off, if we get into a topic here, just let me know and we can just chop it out. I don't care at all.
No. Let's keep it. But I'm curious to know. Maybe people are going to have some insights about this.
It's interesting. Like I remember there was a time a couple of years ago, and I don't remember what the drama was, but like, or what the fan outrage was, or what caused this. But y'all were getting like this amount of negative energy or negative comments or negative engagement from Twitter, and I think it was specifically because both you and Drew were identify themselves on the LGBTQA spectrum, right? Like you guys are both out on your podcast versus Monster of the Week, which was two white cis guys that we engage in those topics, but not in quite the way that you two do. And we just never get any of that. And I remember talking about that on Twitter of like, this is totally unfair. Like it's not even something that we're trying to do. It's just like how the community works somehow. And it's just fucking garbage. Like, it's just really frustrating because we never, like people would scrutinize us, but it was always over like the dumbest shit in the world. Like, you know, we get a license plate wrong or something. Like we didn't notice a certain thing, or it's that level of scrutiny. But it was never like, right. I guess occasionally we got people really didn't like that. Especially me took such a hard line on Sam, but that was about it. And like that's the lightest burn, right? Like that's that's not even a big deal. So. I don't know. It's frustrating that, you know, the women in the community get all of the negative feedback, and obviously, like me and Chris just didn't at all. Nobody yelled at us ever really about anything. So I don't know. It's just frustrating.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'd be curious to know if like other podcasts, like how other supernatural podcasts, maybe this is a study in the making, you know, like I don't know, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm kind of wondering about that. Like
yeah I mean,
perceived level of scrutiny within the supernatural podcasting community.
One of the things I've really tried to do is pull all of the supernatural podcast hosts together, for better or worse. Sometimes that's been working. Sometimes there was some drama, but we're not going to get into the details of that. But for the most part, it's been just fascinating, like just watching people come together at that level, right? Like, and I don't talk to, like, it's not like a regular conversation. I'm not regularly like talking to those people, but at the same time, like having a little community that does this stuff, right? That talks about this kind of stuff. I'd love to get their feedback on that, because I haven't really asked them before of what their community engagement is like. I have to imagine nowadays it's so easy to what's the word that I'm looking for? It's so easy to just define the parameters of the social media that you experience, right? Like, yeah, I have to imagine like nobody's hate listening to a podcast anymore. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't imagine doing that.
Why would you do that?
I don't know.
But, and it's also, I think that's also the thing, right? Like if you're, and there's a difference between loving, like, because I'm thinking about my relationship with Supernatural, and like I love to hate it, right? Like I hate some parts of it, but I actually love the media, right? But why would I go through watching something or listening to something if I actually hate it, or if my only goal is to correct the mistakes that are made, right? Like just find another podcast. Like there are so many.
Or make your own. Right, like
or make your own. Yes,
my co-host Gary from the X-Men podcast, you know, his big podcast, and he's like their main podcast, Watch Out for Fireballs, is huge. Like the numbers that they do are crazy. They're always on the top of the charts. Like they've been doing that podcast for over a decade now. Like it's insane. And so he get like, and they all they do is talk about video games and give opinions on video games, and they will get so much massive negative feedback from people like, I don't think that that's right. And he's like, then do your own podcast about it. Like, I don't care if you don't like Mass Effect 1 and I do, or vice versa. Like, who cares? Like, don't listen to the podcast about a game. And like Gary's one of my best friends ever. I've listened to them talk about a video game I like and just literally turned it off because I was like, I don't need their opinions on this. I just like the game.
Yes. And that's okay, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I don't know, man. But maybe that's the attitude to adopt, right? Like, then if you don't like it, then do your own kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. And that was such a in the nerdy community. Like there was I dealt with a lot of like small time open source software, and like there was always like a real shitty developer like thing that would come in and be like, oh, if you don't like the way this is done, just code it yourself. But like now I look back and I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like they're doing this for free. Like it's not like it's their time. Like they've learned how to do this. Like if you really want to put yourself out there and talk about this stuff, then do it. I'm pretty sure that's how the Sam Winchester focused Supernatural podcast came about. I'm pretty sure Kinsey was just
that's what I was gonna say. I wasn't sure, but yeah.
I think Kinsey, because I know she was a listener. And I think she was just like, y'all aren't talking about Sam Winchester enough, so I'm going to do it myself, and made a whole podcast focus on it. Maybe that's where the Castiel one came too. Maybe that's
what I was thinking too. Like maybe that's where the cast is coming from.
Exactly. Yeah.
But anyway, I all that to say, Chapel Roan, take care of yourself.
Absolutely,
we love you.
Girl. Just do it. Just go. You could go away for years at this point. I don't really think it would matter. Like. And I feel like that could easily happen too, like with the pressure of a follow-up album and things like that. Like because there's absolutely no way that whatever she does next isn't going to be subjected to the most outrageous scrutiny. Every single piece of media that she does is going to be insane. It's never going to live up to what the first album was, which was this slow burn that people discovered over a few years, right? Like there's no way that happens anymore. So. Yeah.
Well, I mean, think about the way that like Olivia, if we're talking about the pop girlies, like look at the way that Olivia Rodrigo's second album was like scrutinized in a way that her first wasn't. Right? Yeah. Like, and the worst part is that the second album is actually a really good pop album, but it just in the public view didn't live up to the first one, and she's still hugely popular, right? Like she's still doing her concerts, like sold out concerts and everything, but we just don't hear about her as much as we did during her first album era, I guess, right?
I was kind of fascinated to find out that like her and Chapel were like recording stuff in the same like area. Like I guess they each have like backing vocal credits on some of each of those albums, which is kind of crazy.
They're friends.
It's insane. Yeah.
And they share a producer also, because I think from what I heard, like the producer had to pause Chapel's album so that Olivia could record her second or something. Like there was something like that where like there was a conflict in the scheduling, and they were like, yes, no problem, like take care of that. Like,
fascinating. Yeah,
they're friends. Yeah,
I love all that background music stuff. It's so fascinating to me. And
it's just nice to see like girls supporting girls, right? Or women supporting women in this case. I think it's cool.
Yeah, there was that news story that came out that like her and Sabrina were like chit-chatting about their like kind of overnight rise to fame and everything. And that just like, I don't know, like being in a podcast community and knowing other podcasters, and I've always tried to help people start their own podcasts and things like that. So I can clearly see like wanting to reach out to someone with that same experience and be like, hey, I got you, or hey, how are you dealing with this, or whatever. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to take a quick break because I thought my dog would just go to sleep, but instead she is barking for some reason. So I'm going to bring her in the podcast room with me. So I'll be right back.
Okay, perfect.
podcast dog today. I'm back.
I think that your dog heard you talking about the pop girlies, and she's like, "Listen to my beautiful music." Oh, it's that time of the day where the church
bells are going off. Excellent. This is going to become I like that we have Fluffy, we have Rosie, and now we have Churchy on the podcast.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's Sunday at 9:30, so I guess Mass is over. That's what's going on.
Catholics are so ostentatious. Everybody has to know your service is over. God, I don't ring a bell when I finish dinner. Like, what are you doing, Catholics?
Right? Well, I mean, so the church right next to our house rings. The bells ring at noon and at 6. And so when my son was little, he would be like, the church bells are ringing. It's time for lunch. That's how he knew. Or like whenever they would ring at like 6 p.m., he's like, "Mom, it's 600," because that's how he tells time. Like he tells the whole number. It's 600. It's time for dinner.
600. Like, I love it.
Yeah,
absolutely love it.
Well, because when he was little and he didn't know, like I was like, you can only get up from, because he's an early riser. He's always been, and I think will be, maybe not during his teenage years, but like will always be. And he would always get up like before 5 a.m. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. No. I'm like, you cannot get out of bed before 6 o'clock. And he's like, what's 6 o'clock? I'm like, it's 600. And so that stayed.
But Mom, cartoons are on. I've got to go see cartoons, and I need some cereal. I need some help. Turn on the TV.
But the thing is, all the cartoons are always on in the era of Netflix, Jeremy.
It's true. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
And that's a problem.
You can just watch them all the time. Yeah.
Because when I was little, cartoons only started at 6 a.m.
So you had no reason to get up at 5 a.m. then. Okay.
No.
I see. Yeah,
so we would check the time for 6, and we would get up at 6. But that's it.
I would wake up early as a kid, but I was always such like a I guess a self-possessed kind of dude. Like I would just like go make my own cereal. Like I would do my best not to wake up anybody in the house. And looking back, I was just like terrified of people being mad at me. Like, I think that's where that came from. But now I'm just like, oh yeah, now let's get up at 5 a.m. every single day. Why not? I had a customer call me at 6:30 a.m.
What?
Yeah,
okay.
And like I was in the shower, like I was up, and it was right at 6:30, and then like 6:45, I call him back right after I get out of the shower or whatever. And we talk and we do our thing or whatever. And then like an hour later, my coworker calls me. He's like, "Hey, did you talk to so-and-so this morning?" I was like, "Yeah, he fucking called me at 6:30. Wait, he said, and my coworker's like, "Well, he called me about 6:35 and said you didn't answer the phone." And I was like, "I called him back in 15 minutes. Like, what does he want?"
At 6:30 a.m., that's not bad.
I mean, that's pretty good. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Even on a regular, like during regular working hours, like 15 minutes to get back to you, not bad at all.
Not bad. Like, I'm usually pretty readily available on the phone, but like, sometimes I can't answer the phone.
Yes. Sometimes at 6:30 you're in the shower, and I feel like that's okay. Like, just saying.
I'm increasingly, and I see this on social media a lot too, of people like, well, he didn't text me back in an hour, or he didn't text me back in 15 minutes or something. And I'm just like, y'all need to remember the good old days when like you would call me and leave a message at my house if I even had one of those devices, and I would call you back hours later. Like, and I would not know anything about where you are or anything until I would get home. So
I actually stopped answering text messages immediately, except if it's like something that really comes up, or messages like immediately. Because it was also taking a toll. And I'm like, why am I always available to others?
Sure.
Because it kind of became a thing where I was like so on the lookout for like texts and emails and calls and whatnot that like I couldn't actually get other work done. And I was like, I can't live like this. Like, this is not, like, my body is just not made for this. Yeah. And so I stopped, like, I took off all of the notifications for my email. So I only check my email like a couple times a day, and I answer all of them like in one shot.
Yeah, and during your email zone. You have an email
and I'm
zone.
in my email zone. Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is that like people will often take like a day or so to get back to me for emails anyway.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't matter if I answer them within the 10 minutes that they send it, right? Like it doesn't actually matter. Like it's okay to not be available for everything all the time.
It's also, I don't know if you have this, like it's very easy to get into a situation where you're judging your expectations of other people are based on what you do. So, this is something I'm struggling with like driving, right? Like, so I drive a lot for a living, and I'm a really, really defensive driver. Like, I pay attention, like I'm doing all this stuff like correctly. So when I see a bad driver, I'm like, my expectations of that other person are so high that I'm just like, you mother, like I get mad. I start getting like a road rage thing happening. I'm like, I got to let go of this. And it's the same thing with emails. Like if you're responding to emails in 5 minutes and they're taking 2 days, like you're going to get mad at them, right? Like you're like, well, I did it. Why aren't you doing it? And it's it's because probably they have a life. they're doing other stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Like
they're not constantly looking at their email service, like just waiting for emails to come in. And that's kind of what I found myself doing. And I'm like, why am I? And I'm like, oh, but I'm waiting for this answer and I'm waiting for this. I'm like, hold on, that is not normal.
Yes.
Don't. Close the app, get other work done, like get yourself like an hour or two of doing something else.
Do anything else with your life.
Yeah, do anything else and then come back to it and see what has come in.
It's astonishing how much like the advice of because me and Chris have talked about this a lot of just how distracting your phone is. Like even when we sit down to like do a hobby, like play video games, like your phone is so distracting. Like you end up like looking at your phone, holding the controller with the other hand. And like the amount of times that I've seen people like, oh yeah, go put your phone on the charger across the room.
Yes.
And I'm just like, we are so broken as a society. We're not going to ever be able to recover from short form anything. Like our attention spans have just been ruined. Like it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
It's going to be bad.
Yeah. Honestly, like I've been thinking lately, I'm like, maybe I need to get myself like a flip phone.
Yeah.
Like, if I need anything else, really?
If I didn't, like, I do so much work on my phone, like even, like, I just, like, if I didn't, and I made the mistake of when I started this job, somehow or another, my personal email and my personal phone ended up being my work email and my work phone. So, like, if I ever retire, I'm going to have to change everything about my life. But, I've thought the same thing of just like, wouldn't it be nice just to have a phone? But like, there's just so much that I do. Like, it's ridiculous.
Well, so one thing that I resent working in a big institution is the fact that like they expect you to use your personal phone for doing stuff, right? Yeah. So like like all of my authenticator apps, they're all on my personal phone. Even if like I have to like, even if it's for work, right? And work doesn't pay for any of my cell phone anything, right? And I'm like, what happened? Like, what if I didn't have one?
Exactly. Yeah. What would you do?
What if I didn't have a smartphone? Like, and I just keep thinking about that, and I'm like, would they have to buy one for me?
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, then maybe I shouldn't have one.
Maybe
right?
you should tell them, yeah, I don't have a phone, right? Like I don't have a phone that has this app or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I had to.
So I don't know. I'm just like, because I have my computer. I can still do all of that stuff from there. I have an iPad. Like, do I really need a smartphone? Like, I've had my iPhone for years now. It's an iPhone 11. And I don't see the need to upgrade.
But this one has.
I want to downgrade.
This one has a USB-C drive and a camera that's like 20% better. Come on.
I know, but I don't really care all that much, to be honest.
It's fair. It's totally fair. Absolutely fair. Do you want to talk about Hannibal? And
I do want to talk about Hannibal. Actually, I really don't want to talk about this episode because it makes me so mad. But let's do that.
Earlier, when you were saying like. We were talking about like hate listening to something, and you were talking about covering or talking about something that you hate, and I was like, it's going to be related to this episode.
But I have some thoughts about that actually, because I'm like, do I hate the show or do I like? I have thoughts. I have thoughts to share about that.
We're going to get into it.
Okay, excellent.